Good morning. Welcome to Disorder in the Court. Hello, Petunia. Hello, anybody else coming in? Please remember to hit the thumbs up. So we're back here for the supermarket massacre trial, or the King Soopers trial, where the defendant is accused of murdering 10 people in cold blood. Hello, Sharon. Nice to see you. Um, Walking into King Soopers in Boulder, Colorado, and just starting his shooting spree in the parking lot, killing 10 people. So just so you know, my stream has started a half hour after they got started, and what just happened in court is a juror came in and said, I know one of the witnesses. The guy on the jury is in the search and rescue field, and the doctor that was on the stand yesterday, who was really precise and very, straightforward in her, the one who the lady who hid in the paper chip aisle, kiosk stand or whatever. He knows her professionally, but they don't know each other super well. So there had to be like like another mid-trial jury voir dire of this guy, and they've decided to go ahead and keep him. But it was interesting. The hello Solo, the prosecutor on the side of, I'm sorry, excuse me, the defendant's lawyer, one of his defense lawyers, is she's overpowering. She overtakes the room. Like the room could be talking at this level, this level, this level, and then she comes out, she's like, hi. It's kind of jarring. But at least today we can see the defendant. We see him sitting there over on the very left of the screen. So at least we can see him today. Not very well, but we can see him. So they made those adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. They've the state is going to call their next witness. And please remember to hit the thumbs up. Thank you very much. Mr. Dougherty.
Morning, Your Honor. Thank you. The people call Jason Hebert to the stand.
Come around that way, and I'll please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that any testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Please be seated.
I wonder if they're going to show the witness stand.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Can you please state your full name, spelling your last name for the court reporter?
Yes, sir. My name is Jason Heberard, and the last name spelling is Hebrard.
How are you currently employed, sir?
I am an agent in charge with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
And just to get the jury familiar with you and to get you settled in up there, can you tell us a little bit about your career background and career path?
Yes, sir. I've been a police officer for about 20 years. I've been with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for 8 years as of August 15th, and spent most of my career as a patrolman, and about 12 years. And then since I've been at the CBI, I've been primarily involved with fraud investigations, cybercrime investigations, and most recently promoted to a supervisory position.
You're the first member of law enforcement that the jury is hearing from in this trial, and there are many more to come, but I'm going to ask you a few questions about the training and experience you had working as a patrol officer, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Can you just walk the jury through how that works in terms of going to the academy, training, and becoming a patrol officer, please?
Absolutely. So I sought out law enforcement training myself on my own dime, as it were, by attending the police academy, self-sponsored. That was 20 years ago in the state of Texas. I completed a basic law enforcement academy, which allowed me to have licensure in the state of Texas as a police officer. I was in a school situation full-time where we learned all of the basics for law enforcement, including constitutional law and state law, as well as law enforcement operations, use of force, things of that nature. And I graduated in November of 2004 and was almost immediately hired as a police officer with the University of North Texas. I was a police officer there for approximately 2 years. In that time, I received training in 2006. I relocated back to Colorado, and I was a police officer with 2 different law enforcement agencies here in the metro area for approximately 10 years. In that time, I continued my in-service training and instructor, so sort of an expert in manipulating and maintenance of police firearms, both handguns and rifles, and continued with my patrol career until 2016 when I joined the CBI. At that point, I pivoted into a investigative law enforcement capacity. I was hired primarily as a fraud and cybercrime investigator. And so my training pivoted somewhat toward the fraud and cybercrime realm. I became a digital forensics examiner. And so I've attended a lot of training for evaluating digital equipment, computers, tablets, phones, things of that nature, to conduct forensic examinations on those devices. That includes surveillance equipment, cameras, things of that nature, recording devices. I did that for a number of years, about 5 or 6 years, I think, total. I have certifications as a certified cybercrime investigator, certified cybercrime examiner, and I'm a digital forensics examiner through the Cellbrite company, which offers equipment that law enforcement uses to conduct those examinations. I'm also a certified fraud examiner through the ACFE, and I hold several other specific certifications for training in law enforcement, elimination tactics instructor, and law enforcement taser instructor. Come in as lateral law enforcement officers providing insert.
Clarify for the jury. You mentioned calls for service when you were talking about your experience working on patrol.
Yes, sir.
And since you're the first member of law enforcement to testify, can you just tell the jury what you mean by calls for service, please?
Absolutely. Anytime you call the police, we would refer to that as a call for service. So it could be anything. And I've been a police officer in a small town and also in a larger town of 100,000 people. So it really runs the gamut. Anything you guys can think of where you would call law enforcement for assistance, that's a calls for service, whether it's an emergency, whether it's a non-emergency issue, that's just a neighborhood dispute, problems with animals, you name it. I think I've done almost everything over the 13 years or so that I did, 12, 13 years I did patrol work. But it just includes anything under the sun.
And did that also include traffic enforcement during your time on patrol?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I do have training in law enforcement and DUI stops. I was certified as a LiDAR and radar user and operator, which is speed detection, and trained in monitoring traffic for traffic violations.
And I'm going to transition to talk about your work with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. You refer to it as CBI.
Yes, sir.
What is the Colorado Bureau of Investigation?
The CBI is a biorequest agency. It was created in legislative action in 1967, so it's been around for a while. The CBI's mission is to assist local law enforcement agencies with requests for investigative assistance or forensic science assistance. In short, the CBI is a helping hand for law enforcement agencies that may not have enough personnel or enough experience in a certain situation where they need to call for additional reinforcements, and mostly in an investigative capacity. The CBI is somewhat diverse now in that it has other special units. So they have a gun enforcement unit that looks for gun crimes. There's a special investigations illicit marijuana unit. The unit that I previously supervised and that I was in during this incident was the high-tech crimes unit, which is identity theft, fraud, and cybercrime investigations. We also have human trafficking and fugitive operations, which is what I am in charge of now. And then what most people know when they hear the CBI in the news is major crimes, which is the arm of CBI that's mostly called by law enforcement agencies when there's a major issue where they need additional jurisdiction, meaning all across the state. State Patrol handles investigative requests that come in.
And you have statewide
Certified peace officers, so police officer, law enforcement officer prior to their employment with the CBI.
And when you say everyone at CBI,
Most law enforcement agencies are very adept at handling anything that happens in their jurisdiction because they live and work in their communities and they understand, what happens, what transpires. There's
I just want to say, now that we can see the defendant, he's really, really fidgety. Keep looking over at the very left of the screen. Maybe I'll zoom in a minute, but he is a super fidgety person.
certain things that occur that are of larger scale, and sometimes they don't have the resources or the personnel to adequately staff it, or they've determined that maybe the personnel that they have available at that time aren't sufficient to respond just because of the importance or because of the scale of the response, or any kind of technical issues that might arise within the investigation, so that at that point they would reach out to the CBI for additional assistance.
so for example, you could be called to work on a child homicide down in La Plata County where they don't have the resources to handle that kind of case.
Correct. Even though I'm primarily to Cheyenne County 2 weeks ago to assist with the death investigation, just because they called us and they needed assistance. And even though it's not what I specialize in full time, any CBI agent is trained so that we can go my bond in an emergent capacity. We had providing investigative support to the Boulder Police Department and to the district attorney's office, just to begin collect information processes. CBI's mission is that of a fact finder. So when we arrived on scene, we were asked, just have a seat. We're going to explain what we have so far. And our responsibility at that point is to see where we can fit in, see where we can assist. And my responsibility initially was the collection of digital evidence as it relates to video footage.
And before we turn to that, just a couple things I want to break down from that last answer, if I may.
Sure.
You mentioned when you responded to others, you responded emergent. You mean other mass murders?
Yes,
And emergent is a police term.
it is.
What does emergent mean?
Emergent means we're disregarding traffic statutes and we're operating in our vehicles in an emergency capacity. It means that we're operating with due regard, so for the safety of the public, but we're allowed to exceed the speed limit. We're allowed to go against traffic control devices, stop signs, red lights, and we operate with audible sirens and air horns and police lights on our vehicles.
And in this mass murder investigation, it was more of a investigatory capacity that you had.
For me, yes, there were other CBI personnel that were closer and that were called in emergent. I responded non-emergent.
And you said you responded the next day.
Yes, sir.
And generally speaking, what did your work consist of in this case? And we're going to start to get into more detail about that.
Initially, I was asked to conduct a neighborhood canvass, is what we call it. And a neighborhood canvass is when we go door to door looking for relevant evidence, whether it's an interview with a neighbor that lives in a house, looking at their house to determine if they might have surveillance cameras that might have caught, footage of whatever the incident was that transpired. So my responsibility in this case was to go conduct a neighborhood canvass. And then subsequent to that, I also recreated the path from the defendant's residence to the King Soopers location on Table Mesa.
So we're going to talk about the canvas first. Was part of that canvas also looking to locate and obtain any video from neighbors along that route?
Yes, sir. That was my primary focus.
Have you had experience prior to that with video surveillance systems?
Yes, in my training and certification as a digital forensic examiner, a lot of my day-to-day work involves manipulating surveillance systems to get information from them, taking hard drives from older legacy systems that have hard drives, or operating systems that have cloud-based storage where the internet's used to store footage.
So I want to follow up on something you just said, actually. You mentioned cloud-based storage. If someone has a Ring camera or a Nest video system on the front of their house, what triggers the recording and something going up to the cloud for storage?
It all depends on how somebody sets up their camera. A lot of folks in here probably have doorbell cameras or Nest cameras affixed to their houses. When you initially set up the device, you have the option to set a variety of what they call triggers, or just pre-designated activities that can occur that would turn the camera on. Some folks don't have the capacity for storage where they can just let the camera run and record constantly. And so just to give an example, I have Nest cameras on my residence. I have for 9 years, and I have mine very, very narrowly focused to only start recording if there's the sound of glass breaking, a dog barking, door knocking, the dropping off of a package or the collection of a package, or if somebody with a face is recognized when they come to my doorbell, like just a human being. Other than that, I don't want it to record because it wastes space.
I appreciate you sharing your own personal experience. So just to use that, if we could stay with that for a moment.
Yes, sir.
So right now outside your house, things could be happening that the system is not recording if they fall outside that criteria.
Correct.
And what would some of those things be?
Just a car driving by, or more for privacy of my neighbors than anything. I don't want it to just randomly record the street throughout the day. Also in consideration of space limitations. So mine has established those, particulars in order to start recording. But if a car just drives by on the street, it will not necessarily record unless there's an associated sound that's happening at the same time, meaning like a dog starts barking, or if a car is driving by, but somebody happens to be dropping off a package, then it would record that car driving by. But if those other pre-indicators aren't met, then it won't record.
And that's something you're familiar with in your work in this area as well.
Intimately, yes, sir.
And did you have an opportunity to obtain a video from 16228 West 65th Place in Arvada, Colorado?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was that video in relation to March 16th of 2021?
It was.
And did that individual have a surveillance system along the lines of what we've been describing up to this point?
Yes, sir. The resident in that instance had a Nest or Google doorbell camera, commonly known as a Nest Hello system, and it functions just like any other external Nest camera. It offers cloud storage that's cloud-based strictly. There's no local storage on the device, and it was set up to record the front of the residence.
And what was the significance of the March 16th date in connection with the investigation?
Hello, sweetie.
The significance of March 16th is that the defendant in this case was observed on camera coming back to his residence, and he was observed in the back of his vehicle manipulating items that were inside the trunk of the car.
And what did you see him, as you said, manipulating in the trunk of the car?
I recognized a large white box that was in the trunk of the vehicle. I know through my training and experience at the police department and at CBI that box is commonly used to store a firearm that was recently purchased.
And the car that the individual was driving, did that appear to be the same car that you later learned was used on March 22nd at King Soopers?
Yes, it was a dark Mercedes sedan.
How did the box appear?
The box was inside the trunk upon the arrival of the vehicle, and I observed him just sort of rummage through the trunk for a moment, and he eventually pulled the box out of the trunk and then was able to walk inside the residence with it.
And did you know anything else about that box or the defendant or the individual's actions on March 16th, 2021?
Good morning.
I did, just through the course of the investigation and what I had learned in pre-briefings when the CBI was asked to respond to assist. I was given some indication that the defendant in this case had acquired a firearm at an area gun store, and that the description of the box that the firearm was acquired in was highly visually similar to what I was seeing in the back of the vehicle.
And from what you learned from the investigation, was that purchase on March 16th as well?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, can I approach with what's been marked as Peoples 14 for identification, please?
Yes, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, fidgeting is also a trait, a feature of schizophrenia.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, sir, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is labeled People's Exhibit 14. This is a surveillance disc marked with case 21CR 497. It also has my signature and my badge or radio number for the CBI and the date of 9/3 of 2024. This is a disc that I recently reviewed that has that surveillance in question.
And to be clear, had you seen that surveillance before 9/3 of 24?
Yes, I have. This is the surveillance that I collected on the date in question, March 24th.
From 16228 West 65th Place in Arvada.
Yes, sir.
And the 9/3/24 designation is you signing and dating it so you'd be prepared to testify at trial.
That's correct.
And does that disc contain the recording that you just described? And did it appear to be accurate when you viewed it on September 3rd, 2024?
It is accurate. It does contain that recording.
Your Honor, at this time, the people move People's 14 into evidence, please.
No objection.
Admitted.
Thank you. And permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
I just looked it up. It is common.
Approximately how long is this video clip, sir?
It's just a few minutes long. It's not very long at all.
I'm going to hit play, and if you don't mind, excuse me. if you don't
Sounds
mind
good,
remaining
Cinnamon.
seated, then I'll ask you some follow-up questions after.
Yes, sir.
WebMD calls it psychomotor agitation. There's a couple different reasons for it. Let me forward here while they're futzing around. I really wish we could see the witness, but I'm glad we can see the defendant.
The routine, just pulled in at a neighborhood speed and entered the driveway cautiously, considering the weather outside and the standing snow.
And did you actually see him pull around the snow that was in the street?
Yes, I did.
And is there another car in the driveway?
Yes, there's what looks to be a Jeep Cherokee or similar vehicle.
You've watched this video several times.
I have.
What do you see the suspect doing when he gets out of the car?
Just acting normally, just gets out of the car, takes his keys with him, opens the trunk, just like any other day, gets stuff out of the back of his car and walks inside. If I was watching the video, I wouldn't think anything of it.
Responsive.
Sustained.
Anything unusual that you see in watching the video?
No, sir.
Objected this line of questioning. I think the video is the best evidence. The jury's had the opportunity to watch it.
Sustained. Speaks for itself.
The box that you see him carrying, is that the box you indicated consistent with the information you had, as well as your own experience to be carrying a firearm?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's March 16th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
Did you try to obtain video from that house from March 22nd, 2021?
I did.
And tell the jury about that, please.
The video systems, as I said, are set up for the preferences of the owner of the video system. So given the way the neighbors have the video established, the systems established, they don't necessarily record everything. And so the video from the perspective of one neighbor's house versus the video of the other neighbor's house, it may have recorded the same things, but it did not retain them within the cloud because it didn't meet the criteria that were established by the owners of the video system. So in this case, there was no relevant video at that exact time from one residence, but there was from the other because of the way they had it set up.
And we'll come to that other residence in just a moment, but staying with this one for a moment, and I'm just going to use the address and not the person's name, if that's okay.
Yes.
But 16228 West 65th Place is the house from which we're viewing this, right?
Yes, sir. If you were to look at an overhead map, it's it and the house to the side of it, which is 208, are both equally across the street, if you will. There's a substantial yard in between those two properties. That yard would actually be directly across the street from the defendant's residence. So either of those houses, they form sort of a trapezoid shape, if you will, where they're either offset by just a few degrees, but they both have a perspective of the front of the residence.
And did the owners of this house give you complete access to their entire video system?
Yes, they did.
So they basically said, go through everything we have and find whatever you need.
Correct.
But you weren't unable to see anything that triggered cloud storage from March 22nd relevant to this case.
Correct.
You found other things from March 22nd, but nothing relevant to this case.
Right.
You mentioned another house, 16208 West 65th Place, Nevada. Did you find video from that neighbor's video system relevant to what we're looking at here?
Yes, I did.
What'd you find?
In that video from 208 residence, there's video of the defendant in this case exiting from the inside of his house, and he's
Good morning.
wearing a large backpack, and he enters his vehicle with that backpack.
And approximately what date and time can you see that on the video?
That is on the date of the shooting at can't remember exactly the time, but it precipitated the shooting by about 20 minutes.
Okay. Does 1:53 p.m. sound accurate?
Yes, it does.
And you mentioned he was carrying a backpack. What did the backpack appear to be to you?
Based on my training and experience,
Calls for speculation.
Your Honor?
You rephrase the question?
Sure. You described it as a backpack.
yes, sir.
Just what did it appear to be to you?
It appeared to be a weapons case.
It's a backpack. They're going to introduce the video, and again, the jury can look at that, but what this officer thinks it appeared to be, it's a backpack. He has no idea what's in the backpack because you can't see what's in the backpack. So I don't understand this line in questioning. So under a 401, 403 analysis, I object.
Your Honor, there are different kinds of backpack. If you ask me what a camelback looks like as opposed to a backpack, as opposed to a kid's backpack, I could describe it, and I'm not an expert.
It's a unique kind. It's a different than a normal backpack.
I'm trying to ask that question.
Overruled.
Thank you. What did the backpack appear to you? How did it look
It appeared to be a weapons storage backpack.
based on what you see that made you reach that conclusion?
The backpack is commonly associated with tactical gear. It's the type of backpack that you would use if you were going to carry a rifle and you were needing to enclose it within a backpack. It has a longer area on the top of the backpack that allows for the barrel to be covered.
What did you see the individual do when he carried the pack out to his car?
He placed the backpack into the vehicle and then got inside the vehicle.
Did he appear to be confused at all?
No, sir.
Did you see him looking off and staring at innocuous objects?
No, sir. He was very direct.
Any darting glances around?
Objection,
No,
Your
sir.
Honor, you can't see this on video. Speculation.
Best evidence is the video. It'll speak for itself.
And with the court's permission, I'd like to approach and show you what's been marked as People's 15 for identification.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, sir, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
This is the video that was collected from 16208 West 65th Place.
How do you know that to be the same video that you collected?
Because it has my signature on it and it's affixed with the date and a notation.
And you've had an opportunity to watch it?
Yes, I have.
And is that a fair and exact recording of what you obtained from 16208 West 65th Place?
It's an exact recording.
Your Honor, at this time, the people move people's 15 into evidence, please.
No objection.
Admitted.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Johnny, look at the screen. See how it says thumbnail there? I'm not sure why YouTube is putting a completely different thumbnail on my stream, but that's what the thumbnail is supposed to be. Freaking YouTube. Yeah, I'm sitting here drinking caffeine right now. Better believe it, y'all. I had a bit of a rough morning.
How long is this video?
This one's also pretty short, just a few minutes.
See the garage going up now?
Yes, sir.
See, oh man, this is so frustrating. They're watching video evidence right now, and we can't see it, and we can't see the witness. It's very frustrating.
Made his way westbound. The street changes names a variety of times, but 66th is generally the accepted term for that. It connects with Highway 93, Colorado 93, which runs north and south as an arterial roadway for the metro area on the west side.
Were you able to obtain additional video from up near Highway 93?
Yes, I was, from the water treatment plant.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to approach and show the witness what I've marked. It's one disc, but I've marked it as 16 and 17 because there are two clips on it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
What is contained on people 16 and 17 for identification?
This is the disc that contains Arvada water treatment plant surveillance footage.
And what did you see on the Arvada water treatment plant surveillance system?
This is two exterior cameras for that property. That's owned by the city of Arvada. Those are what are commonly referred to as parapet cameras. So they're mounted on the exterior of the building, and they're typically pan tilt zoom cameras, which are allowed to move and focus. And in those cameras, there are two perspectives of the vehicle traveling westbound on that street, passing the water treatment plant and approaching Colorado 93.
From two different vantage points.
Correct.
And what do you see in looking at their surveillance video?
Just normal operation of a vehicle. There were two vehicles that travel through that same recording from both perspectives. The vehicle in question, the defendant's Mercedes, was traveling approximately the same speed and with the same
Hi,
driving characteristics
Rachel.
as those two vehicles.
We're talking about how we take our coffee. Johnny,
And that
yeah,
recording you have, that disc you have there, 16 and 17, is that a fair, in fact, exact recording of what you viewed from those two different camera angles at the Arvada water treatment plant?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, people move that disc, which contains 16 and 17
So-
evidence, please.
No objection.
Admitted.
since we are being left out of the evidence and the witness, and all we can see is the fidgety defendant, at least we can. And we're hearing rather dry testimony from CBI. I was just about to think about switching to the TikTok sentencing because they were all in court, but they just closed the stream again. It was open and then they closed it. So anyway,
Which one of those vehicles was the suspect vehicle in question?
The suspect vehicle in question was the third vehicle that was westbound. So it was seen after the first two pickup trucks that traveled westbound.
Your Honor, if I may, I'm going to publish people 17.
Yes, sir.
And
sounds a lot like
from a
me,
different
Tony.
vantage point, but the same Arvada water treatment plant.
Correct. This is a westbound view of the same street. This is position 19 in Arvada's surveillance system. and it captures both eastbound and westbound traffic on that street. It also captures the intersection with Colorado 93.
And just to get the jury oriented to this, where is Highway 93 in this picture before I hit play?
This is Colorado 93 that runs north and south, just beyond the west side of the water tower.
So before I hit play, what should the jury be looking for in this particular exhibit?
This covers the employee lot for the water treatment plant. The roadway where you just observed the vehicles traveling is perpendicular to Colorado 93, and it's actually positioned between two chain link fences. This fence right here and this fence right here are both border fences for eastbound and westbound traffic. And so that's where we will see the vehicle. It will continue westbound until it reaches the intersection of Colorado 93, where it pauses for traffic observance, and then the driver continues northbound on Colorado 93. And it's hard to make out just due to the resolution of the camera, but it is visible. That's the first truck. That's the second pickup truck with a camper shell. And then following that is the defendant's vehicle, which is now visible.
Don't y'all hate feeling left out of seeing thing? You know, it's one thing to be left out of
You can maintain visual of the vehicle as it
evidence, but not all
maintains
of it.
position in the far right lane.
As we watch the end of this, did it appear that that vehicle was obeying the traffic laws, staying with the flow of traffic?
Objection, Your Honor, same objection as always.
Sustain.
Objection!
Do you see the vehicle turning up at 93?
I did. It just proceeded northbound and it just went beyond the frame.
And what is in that direction?
The city of Boulder and the King Soopers on Table Mesa.
As part of your continuing investigation to this case, were you also asked to conduct what's called a drive time test?
I was.
And can you tell the jury what that means, please?
In essence, what I was asked to do was to recreate the defendant's most logical course of operating a vehicle from his place where he left to the place where he was going. So his ultimate destination, as we know, being the King Soopers store on Table Mesa. With my partner, Agent Derek Graham, we used a stopwatch. We left the defendant's residence at 16229 at approximately 1:06 p.m. And we traveled from his residence using the most logical course of travel based on Google Maps to go from his residence to the King Soopers location. And it took us the same route, essentially westbound through the neighborhood to this arterial roadway that runs east and west through the city of Arvada, which then connected to Colorado 93 and took us northbound into the city of Boulder and ultimately to the Table Mesa location.
And how were you driving? In other words, were you obeying all the rules of the road?
Yes, we intentionally drove at or below the speed limit, just as we were to be driving in any other capacity that was non-emergent. We stopped for all traffic signs, traffic lights, red lights, any official traffic control device, and we maintained speed limit. And we stayed consistent with the flow of traffic, which at the time, nobody was speeding or driving recklessly that we saw, and we timed the drive.
How long did it take you to go from the suspect's residence at 16229 in Arvada to the King Soopers in South Boulder?
In this case, it was approximately 23 minutes.
How far a distance is that?
It's approximately 15.1 miles, given the course that we took.
So 23 minutes from door to door.
Yes, sir.
Did you drive around or park in the neighborhood behind King Soopers at all?
We had to, due to the limitations of traffic movement at the scene at the time.
What do you mean by that?
There's closed roadways, areas that were blocked off by Boulder County Sheriff's Department, Boulder Police Department vehicles.
Due to the ongoing investigation?
Correct.
And I'm not going to get into any detail about other things you did, but did you do other things connected to the investigation?
I did. I just provided investigative support throughout the preliminary month of the investigation. So for about 4 weeks, just remained on scene at the command post and provided assistance with whatever we could.
And those are things that are going to be covered by other witnesses during the course of the trial?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I have no further questions for you. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
All right, maybe he be released from the subpoena.
Yes, Your Honor, please.
I have no question.
All right, thank you, sir. You are free to go and you're released from your subpoena.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Do you want to retrieve the exhibits and then call your next witness, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Pyler, Joe, come around to your left. There you go. Yes, sir. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury any testimony you give shall be the truth?
Jury and tell the court reporter how to spell your last name. The City of Westminster.
Approximately 20 years.
How long have you been with the City of Westminster?
Approximately 20 years.
Prior to coming to Westminster, did you have any law enforcement experience?
I did. I worked for the City of Golden for approximately 6 years and the Summit County Sheriff's Office for 4 years prior to that.
So 30 years in law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
What, just briefly, training did you have during that 30 years?
My initial training consisted of a police academy, basic police academy, which taught me policy and procedure, statutes, law enforcement procedure, things of that nature. Over the course of 30 years, I've attended a significant number of hours of training in topics such as homicide investigations, child abuse investigations, a variety of different topics of that nature.
What is your current assignment at the Westminster PD?
For the last 9 years, I've been assigned to the FBI Denver Rocky Mountain Safe Streets Task Force as a task force officer.
Tell the jury what that means.
The task force is comprised of local, state, and federal investigators who investigate violent crimes in the Denver area that have a federal nexus. Our most visible type of investigation that we conduct is bank robbery investigations, but we also have a little bit of local, state, and federal investigators. So we have the city. We also have some agents. They are.
And that task force works under the or cast.
So carefully on historical cell phone records. I am.
Describe the training that you had to be covered.
I attended a 2-day class, attended a 3-day advanced class called a field training exercise. That's class working cases vacation by professors from the Florida Institute of Technology, all the major cellular providers, specifically about their networks and how their networks operated. Who taught us AT&T.
Look, you guys, as I was just noticing, I've been trying to forward to the point where he's talking about this case and not his experience. But as I was doing that, look at the defendant. He cannot sit still to save his life. Look at this.
Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint at the time, who taught us specifically about their networks and how their networks operated. The second 2-week session was basically an evaluation period. We spent a week with a case. They basically provided us with information about a case. We had to conduct analysis, provide presentation, and then we had to testify to that presentation. Maintaining that we teach. Basically, it's looking at phone records. The phone records that we evaluate.
How many cases has CAST conducted? How many examinations has CAST done?
So CAST has examined hundreds of thousands of records since 2011. That was more or less the inception of the CAST unit within the FBI. And I've, in the 2 years or 3 years I've been certified, I've looked at several thousand sets of records in over 200 cases.
Have you testified as an expert witness before?
I have.
How many times and where?
I've testified as an expert witness since 2021, 9 times in Adams County, Jefferson County.
2 agents,
Um,
the criminal cases.
It is not.
Where else is it used?
We use cast techniques in missing persons and
Sir, as an expert witness in cellular telephone record analysis.
No voir dire or objection.
All right, thank you. He will be admitted as an expert in that field.
What is your proper title? Is it agent, officer, detective? You first become involved in this case?
my very initial involvement was actually the day after the shooting. CAST was utilized during the course of the investigation to look at various sets of records. So myself and another CAST asset did conduct very preliminary analysis during that time frame and the days after the incident. Then approximately 3 or 4 months ago, I was asked to conduct a formal analysis of all those records.
Talk about the difference between that initial work that you did and the formal work that you were requested to do.
A preliminary analysis is typically conducted to provide avenues for investigation, looking at the call records to see who's being called or who's calling, where the device is located, where it's gone, where it's been, just looking for possible leads, further follow-up that needs to be done. A formal analysis typically looks at very specific dates, times, locations, and what particular devices we're doing with the network at those dates, times, or locations.
And in this particular case, were you asked to do the formal examination for a time period of January to March 22nd of 2021?
I was.
And that analysis was specifically paying attention to a couple of dates and times that were revealed during the investigation.
That is correct.
Did you prepare a summary of the techniques and technology you utilized, as well as the results from the cell phone records in this particular case?
I did.
Would it assist you to utilize that summary of the information in your testimony here today and explaining it to the jury?
It would.
Judge, if I could approach
Yes, sir.
that, and when you're done, let me know.
I'm done.
And Judge, for the record, I've handed Detective Pyler what has been marked as People's Exhibit 18 for identification. Can you tell us what I handed you?
Yes, Exhibit 18 is the report I prepared regarding my analysis.
Is it a fair and accurate summary of the results you learned from the cell phone analysis in this case?
It is.
Judge, I would move to admit People's Exhibit 18.
Mr. Dunn?
No voir dire or objection, Judge.
All right, thank you.
And permission to publish.
Yes, sir.
So I've been, I think, referring to it as the cell phone analysis you did in this case. Was your formal review limited to just a cell phone?
It was not.
What else did you look at in this case?
I also reviewed records for a Mercedes sedan. The Mercedes sedan was what we call a connected car and had cellular connectivity. It communicated with the cellular network. So I looked at those records as well.
Tell us a little more about how the Mercedes communicates with cell technology, how that works.
Sure. Newer cars, basically manufacturers are installing cell phones in their newer cars. They use these for a variety of reasons. Some of it could be diagnostic or maintenance, so that they can, remind you when your car needs an oil change, or tell you on your phone, hey, there's a problem with your car, something along that nature. The other thing they use it for is as a Wi-Fi hotspot. If you have a Wi-Fi hotspot in your new car, it's connected to a cellular network. So it's for lack of a better word, it's a $50,000 cell phone on wheels.
So this particular slide, the first slide in People's Exhibit 18 that you prepared, includes the information about the two devices, I guess, that you analyzed in this case.
Correct. The subject cell phone was on the T-Mobile cellular network, and that's the number that ends in 4482. And then the Mercedes sedan is identified by not a phone number, but another identifier called an IMSI, and that ends in 8369. That particular car was on the Verizon network.
Is there an advantage or disadvantage to having two different networks provide service when you're looking at two devices at the same time?
Not really. It may provide a fuller picture if one of them doesn't have connectivity and the other one does. You know, sometimes we'll see one device, not the other.
Why is one of them in green and one of them in red on this first slide describing the devices?
During the course of the analysis, the records are indicated the same way. So any records in green are going to be associated to the cell phone. Any records or representations are going to, in red, are going to be for the Mercedes.
And that's just the way you color coded it for the ease of presentation so that we could determine one from the other.
Correct.
Moving to slide 2, this is more just definitional information provided about what you included in the summary and how you got that information.
It is. It talks about the investigative information, the information that I was provided initially for the analysis. It talks about the methodology we use, how we interpret and display these records. It talks about the cell site locations, where we obtain those records, and how we reach our conclusions.
Sure.
At the bottom, during the course of this analysis, there was a time change. So the records that we get from the providers are provided in what's called coordinated universal time, or UTC. And so we have to do a little bit of math sometimes to calculate what time it is here in Denver or Boulder at the time. So again, this just indicates there was a time change when we went from 7 hours behind UTC to 6 hours behind UTC.
And that's just daylight savings when we make that switch.
Correct.
That switch was on March 14th in 2021. And so you had to change from the -6, -7. That was the difference in
Correct.
translating those records that you received into local time.
Correct.
All records that we're going to show to the jury in this summary are local time here in Boulder, Colorado.
They are.
I don't know.
Moving to slide 3,
Wait.
tell us what's on the left and explain a little more about what a cell site is and how it works.
So the picture in the lower left-hand corner of the screen is a cell tower. You can see from the diagram that there are 3 faces to that cell tower. The cellular companies, rather than providing 360-degree coverage from one antenna to all its customers, typically sectorize their antennas, and they break it into 3 different antenna faces. Each antenna face is designed to cover approximately 120 degrees of that 30-degree circle, and each antenna face has a direction. It points in a direction. They call that the azimuth of that sector face. So in this representation on the right-hand side, you can see that sector 1, basically the azimuth or the center of that 120 degrees is 0 degrees, which would be due north, or 12 o'clock on a clock. Sector 2 covers the next 120 degrees. So its azimuth is 120 degrees, covering 60 degrees on either side. And then the last tower has an azimuth of 240 degrees. They're not all this easy. The azimuths are 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 32 degrees, things like that. But regardless, typically they provide 120-degree coverage in that direction.
So a lot of degrees, a lot of numbers. Fair to say that the antennas on a cell tower basically point in 3 main directions as you go around that tower.
Typically, yes.
How does the cell phone work in interacting with these particular sectors and the cell site?
So a cell phone at its most basic is a 2-way radio. The difference between a cell phone and a 2-way radio is that cell phones don't communicate directly with each other. They connect with each other through a network. So every time a cell phone connects with a network, a record is generated. That record can include the date and time of the transaction, the duration, the type of transaction. It may be a voice call, it could be a text message, or it could be a data session like web browsing, something like that. One of the other sets of data that it captures is the cell site and sector that the cell phone used for that transaction. So when we look at that, if we know that, say, a cell phone connected with sector 1 in this diagram, that the cell phone is typically going to be in an area likely north of the cellular tower. And so using that, we can look at those records, we can look at the tower and the sector, and we can very generally geolocate the device where it may be.
Talk about how self-service providers attempt to give the best service to their customers.
So the network engineers, obviously, at the end of the day, a cell phone company is a business. They're in it to make money. So their goal is to provide the best service that they possibly can to their subscribers, whether that's installing more towers or tweaking the antennas or whatever the case may be. A couple of things they have to look at. One of the big things here in Colorado is terrain. We have terrain. This isn't Kansas. So network engineering in Colorado may be a little bit different than it would be in, say, Kansas. So terrain is one of the factors that they have to look at providing service. The other thing is the environment. Obviously, cell towers in Denver are going to be engineered a little bit differently than Sterling, because Sterling doesn't have buildings and probably doesn't have tens of thousands of customers. So in an urban environment, towers may be a little bit closer together, and there will be more towers.
Are there limits on how much a particular antenna on a tower can take when it comes to service?
As far as capacity,
I mean, is there an unlimited number? Could you have 1 million cell phones connecting to the same sector on the same tower at the same time?
1 million would be unlikely. They engineer the cell towers to provide more capacity than they think they're going to need. So if they think they're going to need 10,000 subscribers at a time, they'll typically engineer it more than that. From talking with network engineers, they never reach capacity. 99% of the time, each sector and antenna is able to handle the capacity.
Do instances exist where there's overlap between two cell tower sites?
Yes, the coverage areas of cell tower sites do overlap significantly.
Why?
Well, one of the reasons is that with cell phones, you're not tied to a cord, so you can move. If you connect to a cell phone in Boulder, and say you're driving to Denver, that cell phone tower in Boulder is not going to provide you coverage all the way to Denver. It just can't do that. So the network is engineered such that each tower and antenna provides a little bit of overlap to the next tower down the line. So as you're driving, it does what's called a handoff. So in Boulder, you drive down towards Superior, the network in that overlap area will hand it off to a tower in Superior, then move down to Westminster. That way you don't lose your call.
You never actually know this is happening. When you're driving while talking on your cell phone, it's automatically changing to whatever the most readily available or best site is for where you're at as you continue to move.
Yes, the network controls that, and it's seamless generally.
Talk about, with respect to your historical analysis of the records in this case, when you got the records, what was the first thing you did?
The first thing that we do, obviously, is we look at the records to see what dates and times we're looking at. We look to ensure that we do have all the data we need, such as the cell sites and sectors and things like that. And then we obtain a cell phone list from the providers, so we know where the towers are.
You said a cell phone list. Is it a cell tower list?
Sorry, cell tower list.
And then you take all of that data and what do you do with it?
Typically, we have programs. We can do it manually. If we know where the cell site is from the tower list, we can manually plot each transaction. But we have software available that allows us to input the records, the cell tower lists together, and then map them.
So during this time period of January to March 2021, March 22nd, were you able to determine the locations during that time frame of the Mercedes as well as the cell phone that belonged to the defendant?
I was.
And you were able to determine that from communications, meaning text messages or data sessions or phone calls, whatever was the cause of that device communicating with one of these towers, you were able to figure out where those devices were at?
Very generally, yes, sir.
Talk to us a little bit about slide 4 that kind of explains what information you included in your summary and how you included it.
Slide 4 basically shows how we depict these network transactions on the maps, how we graphically depict them. On the left-hand side, we talk about the individual cell sites and what that looks like. You can see a green wedge. That is the 120-degree coverage of a particular sector on a tower located at the base of the wedge. In these diagrams, these maps that we're going to look at, the green dots are T-Mobile cellular towers, the locations of which we obtained from the cell tower list, and the red depict Verizon cellular towers. You see a shaded area at the base of the wedge. That's not the coverage area of that particular antenna. That just helps kind of graphically illustrate which direction that is. That doesn't mean that it's the coverage area and where the phone might actually be.
So somebody, even if you showed this visual representation, it doesn't mean they're within the shaded area. It just means they're somewhere within that pie shape.
Correct.
And then with respect to the information on the boxes that we're going to see identifying the different connections or data sessions, what is the information at the top?
The information at the top would be network transactions such as voice, text, or data sessions. It provides us with the cell site or the tower identifier. That's a number, as well as the individual sector on that tower. It gives us the date and time of that particular transaction, the duration in seconds of that transaction, and then what type of transaction it is, if it's a voice call or a data session. In this particular instance, the box is red, so this would illustrate a transaction for the Mercedes. At the bottom, there's another set of data that we use when we conduct our analysis that the cell phone providers can give us. It's called timing advance. In a nutshell, it's an engineering measurement that gives us the tower and sector that the measurement is made from, but it also gives us the estimated distance from the tower. So it helps us sometimes refine the location of the device within a sector.
So I'm understanding the cell identifier sector is basically the cell company's telling you this is the location of the tower and which direction the antenna that was used is pointing.
Yes, with this number and the cell tower list, we can calculate that, the location and the direction, the azimuth.
And with respect to this timing advanced, it gives greater precision with respect to the location than just the general tower location.
Yes, it helps us refine the location within the sector.
And this is a little more detail about that timing advance. Explain kind of how it works.
It is. So basically, it kind of goes back to elementary or middle school when we calculate distance from speed and time. If we know the speed, we know the time that something takes to travel, we can calculate the distance. This is kind of how the cellular providers can estimate the distance of the device from the tower. So they take the measurement of the time, they send a signal to the device and back. They know that time. Radio waves travel at the speed of light. Then they can calculate the distance from that. The timing advance, again, helps them refine the location of the device within the sector. The device is typically going to be located within in the 4G environment within a 78-meter band of that reported distance. It could be closer to the tower, but it's never going to be further.
Okay. All right, moving to the actual summary of the records that you analyzed in this particular case. Describe slide 6 and why January 19th, 2021, 4:27 p.m. to 5:31 p.m. was something you looked at.
During the course of the investigation, investigators looked at credit card records and determined that there have been several purchases at gun shops in the North Metro Denver area. So that's one of the things we looked at is the credit card records and the purchases that were made at these particular gun shops. And then I looked at the records for the phone and the Mercedes to see if either of them was in the area of these gun shops on that day. So on this slide in particular, on January 19th, we look at 2 credit card purchases at Westminster Arms, which is located in Arvada, Colorado. The 2 purchases on the 19th, I looked at the records for the 19th and determined that between 4:27 PM and 5:31 PM that both the cellular phone, the green T-Mobile cellular phone that's indicated on the map, and the red Mercedes sedan were both utilizing towers near the Westminster Arms gun store during that time period between 4:27 PM and 5:31 PM, indicating that both devices were in the area of that gun shop.
And
We are switching over. We are switching over to the long-awaited sentencing of the TikTok murderer. You all know this. I think it's going to be a little more interesting. Did any of you watch this trial, the TikTok murderer? This sentencing was supposed to start a while ago, and they've been like everybody's been assembled in the courtroom waiting for him to come in. So this guy stalked his girlfriend. It's based in San Diego. He stalked his girlfriend. And he thought that she was in a relationship. It was his ex-girlfriend, actually. He thought she was fooling around with somebody. So he goes into the home where she lived and basically shot both the girlfriend and the person he thought she was having a relationship with, shot them in the face, if I'm remembering things correctly. And he tried to argue that it was a spur of the moment, like complete heat of the moment type decision. But the jury found that it was premeditated. So now he's getting his sentencing, and they're, going to give the victim impact statements. But he did a lot of the reason they're calling him a TikTok murderer or TikTok star murderer or whatever is because he was pretty popular on TikTok. He had, several 100,000 followers, if I remember correctly.
Please remain seated. Come to order. This court is now in session.
And he made himself famous by doing a really good Al Pacino impression.
All right, the record will reflect on the Boulevard matter. I've got both counsel, Mr. Boulevard. Before we begin, there's a few things that we need kind of.
Is she his wife? I didn't know.
We can do that.
I knew they were
Mr.
breaking up.
Boulevard, you have the right to appeal the judgment of this court. That must be filed within 60 days in this court and not the Court of Appeal. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. A couple things before we begin. We have a new trial motion, which we will do first. So I will start with the defense. You're up.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor. Jody Green, Deputy Public Defender on behalf of Mr. Boulevard. Your Honor, we did file a motion for a new trial pending what was the verdict in this case. This was something that we had addressed with the court and counsel during trial as it happened right during, I should say, Mr. Boulevard's testimony. The court at that time asked us to return the following day with a transcript from Mr. Brian Edwards' phone calls to his family members, which was the subject of the questionable conduct by the prosecutor that we believe rises to the level of prosecutorial misconduct. When we returned the next day,
Oh, interesting.
we provided a transcript to the court. The court had an opportunity to review it. At that time, the court offered a remedy which the defense did not believe was proper and fully addressed the issue. The remedy offered by the court was to instruct the jury that they could disregard or that they should disregard that line of questioning as well as the answer provided by Mr. Boulevard. The defense elected instead of that remedy that we felt was not proper and didn't fully address the issue to argue it to the jury. After closing argument, the court instructed counsel that it had reviewed the transcripts again, agreed now with defense that that question should not have been asked by Madam Prosecutor, but since it was post-closing, the court reiterated its earlier argument that it didn't think that it rose to any sort of level of error in the sense that Mr. Abulaban had been on the stand for 3 days and it came towards the end of his testimony, and that ultimately it wouldn't impact given the length of the testimony. The defense disagrees. We filed this motion asking the court to reconsider and to allow a new trial in the matter, given all the arguments laid out specifically in our papers. We would just like to point out that in a case, in any criminal case, an elevated standard of conduct applies to the prosecution. They have a duty not to just get a conviction, but actually to make sure that truth and justice are done. In this case, we know that question was posed to Mr. Abulaban that was not going to be substantiated. The prosecution did not have Mr. Brian Edwards as a witness. The prosecution did not have a transcript of these phone calls where the prosecution was alleging that Mr. Abulaban had bragged to inmates about having killed his wife and her friend. This was simply a line of questioning where the prosecution had no ability to prove what they were asking Mr. Abulaban, and instead the jury was left with the impression that as the prosecutor stood up with a giant binder full of questions that she was marking off, the jury is left with the impression that this is yet again another situation where Mr. Abulaban cannot be believed. But the defense is left hamstrung and not able to really rehabilitate in that moment because Mr. Edwards is not here as a witness. Mr. Edwards' phone calls were not transcribed to provide to the jury. Ms. Brass told us at the time that this was raised during the trial, and again in her moving papers, that she reads the transcripts of Mr. Brian Edwards' phone calls very differently than I think the plain language of those phone calls, which in our review of those phone calls and the transcripts, it is clear that Mr. Edwards did not ever have a conversation with Mr. Abulaban about this case. They were separate. Mr. Abulaban was in the hole, Mr. Edwards was in the hole. There was no communication, and there is nothing in these phone calls to substantiate that there was ever a conversation between the two. If the prosecution really believed that that was the case, they would have brought Brian Edwards in. They would have had those transcripts. They would have done things to be able to fully substantiate, and that's where the issue lies.
Yes.
Is that they
Well,
asked
thank you.
questions that
Hella
clearly did not
invasive
substantiate.
stalking.
A sort of idea that this was done accidentally or with misremembering what the transcript says, it really is not the question. This does not have to involve any sort of ill intent or ill will on behalf of the prosecutor because they're held to a different, higher standard than other lawyers in court. And so we are asking the court for all of those reasons to order a new trial. Although the court did offer a remedy, we do not believe it was a proper remedy that would fully remedy the situation in front of the jury. The damage had been done. That bell
Glad to
was not
hear it,
wrong.
Sparkles.
The only way to properly fix that was to instruct the jury that the prosecutor had committed prosecutorial misconduct and that that was something that they could consider in the totality of the case as they evaluated it and deliberated. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, there was no misconduct or error in this case, and the defense has not cited any legal authority showing that the two questions that I asked the defendant on cross-examination require a new trial in this case. The two questions I asked were based on discovery jail calls that had been out since March of 2023. The defense was fully aware of these calls, as was the defendant. There were multiple statements made by Brian Edwards on these jail calls to his sister and to his wife, indicating that Mr. Edwards had a lot of information about the defendant that could only have come from the defendant. Mr. Edwards knew generally what the defendant looked like. He knew that he was involved with TikTok. He knew the defendant's defense in this case as a heat of passion defense. That is not common knowledge. That was not knowledge that was brought forward at arraignment or the preliminary hearing or anywhere in court. That was the defendant's defense that we heard during this trial. the defendant had talked in similar jail calls to his parents about his heat of passion defense, about raising that defense so that would allow him to get out earlier. He told Mr. Edwards and or inmates at jail about this defense, which is how Mr. Edwards knew about it and why he was relaying that the defendant had to prove that he killed his bitch and the other woman or the other man in the heat of the rage, and that's what would get him only 5 years per victim. Mr. Edwards had a lot of very specific information about the defendant's, not only his defense of heat of passion, but also details about the killings. It was very apparent to me in reading the transcripts and listening to those calls that the defendant provided this information. There was one particular quote from Mr. Edwards. First of all, Mr. Edwards was arguing to his wife that, his wife and the other man were inside his house, meaning the defendant's house, as if that was some kind of excuse or justification for killing. Mr. Edwards relayed to his wife that the defendant's wife and the other man were doing drugs inside the apartment. That is not public knowledge. That is not even the truth. That is information that, besides SDPD knowing about a potential bag of cocaine, presumably at the scene, the only other person that had information about drugs at the crime scene was the defendant. Not Mr. Edwards, not anything Mr. Edwards heard on TV or read in the newspaper. That was nowhere in any of the media. So the information that Mr. Edwards had about any potential drugs at the scene came from the defendant. The defendant is the only person that had that information. So to say that Mr. Edwards and the defendant never had a conversation, that is not apparent to me. That is still not apparent in those calls. Mr. Edwards never said in either of those jail calls that he had never met the defendant during his whole time in jail. Mr. Edwards never said, I have never spoken to the TikTok killer or the defendant at any point in time in jail. All he said during those calls was that the defendant was in the hole that month. So maybe he didn't have a conversation with the defendant that month, but there is nothing in those calls that indicates that the defendant had never had a conversation with Mr. Edwards. So based on all the information contained in the calls, I certainly had a firm belief that the defendant provided that information. And when the defendant is testifying in a first-degree murder case and has a heat of passion defense and is testifying that he felt either badly about what he did, that he was sorry, or that he didn't mean to do it, he testified that he didn't even realize he shot Anna. When the defendant is making all those statements during his testimony, it is certainly relevant for the prosecutor to ask him questions on cross-examination that go towards his lack of remorse. And the fact that he was bragging to inmates, making statements to inmates about killing Anna and Ray or killing his bitch and the man she was cheating with, the kinds of statements that I heard in those jail calls, it is certainly very relevant for me to ask those questions on cross-examination. Because that shows the defendant did not have remorse for what he did. It wasn't in the heat of the moment. It was planned, and then he's bragging to inmates about it. I limited my inquiry to 2 questions, and then I moved on. I didn't argue it further. I didn't even argue it in closing. Mr. Edwards was in jail for a murder case as well. I'm not going to bring in another suspected murderer to testify in a case where there's overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt. The prosecution can elect what witnesses it will call or not, and that's what I did in this case. The defendant, his response was certainly showing consciousness of guilt. When I asked him, did you ever brag to Mr. Edwards? His response should have just been no. If he really never had a conversation with Brian Edwards or any inmate in jail about the killings, his response would have just been no. That was not his response. He had an outburst. He told me, is this some kind of jail informant that you're asking me about? That shows his guilt in the fact that he knows he made these statements to inmates in jail. And so it's perfectly reasonable for me to ask those questions.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
The-
bullshit.
All right, let me make something clear right now.
Whoa.
If there is any disturbance, you will be put outside, all right? That happens only once, it's happened now, it will not happen again. And that includes you, Mr. Baldwin. Thank you.
Did you hear that?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The defense cited numerous cases in their brief without the facts.
Listen.
And
All right? That happens only once. It's happened now. It will not be.
inmates in jail. And so it's perfectly reasonable for me to ask those questions.
Yeah,
The-
bullshit.
Wow. Wow. Did you hear that? Bullshit. Bullshit. I mean, control yourselves. This is why we have criminals in the courtroom. They fucking can't control themselves.
All right, let me.
Suppose he made these statements to inmates. If he really never had a conversation with Brian Edwards or any inmate in jail about the killings, his response would have just been no. That was not his response. He had an outburst. He told me, is this some kind of jail informant that you're asking me about? That shows his guilt in the fact that he knows he made these statements to inmates in jail. And so it's perfectly reasonable for me to ask those questions.
Yeah,
The-
bullshit.
That was two different people. First, he says bullshit, and then somebody else said bullshit behind him. I think he may have a fan club. I may need to look into this. But isn't it interesting that the lawyer says something like, I was talking to him about this and he had an outburst, and then he follows her sentence with an actual outburst in court. My goodness. It could have been his mom. I don't know. It must be somebody on his side, but my understanding is that he's like a mini Wade Wilson with his fan club. He does have fans. He's a charismatic, good-looking young guy. We got to figure this shit out, man, with people actually thinking that I'm going to become a fan club member of somebody who is convicted for murdering people. What the fuck? I'm sorry, you guys. It gets me going so bad. Ugh.
All right, let me make something clear right now.
I'm sorry.
If there is any disturbance, you will be put outside. All right? That happens only once. It's happened now. It will not happen again. And that includes you, Mr. Baldwin. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. The defense cited numerous cases in their brief without the facts.
Yep,
And
that's
those
true,
facts are
Karen.
not the same scenario here. The defendant cited just very briefly the case of People versus Centeno, a case where the prosecutor argued to the jury a misleading standard of proof in the case. That did not happen here. I never argued in a proper standard of proof. The defense cited People versus Force, a case where the prosecutor made a comment to the defense attorney that, I may charge your client with perjury if he testifies inconsistently. So the defendant in that case did not testify during that trial. That did not happen here. I didn't raise any perjury charges. The defendant was able to testify fully for 3 days, showing his side of the story. So the factual scenarios in those cases cited by the defense in their moving papers are completely different than the factual situation here. The other cases cited were People versus Fasaro and People versus Jasso. Those cases were not overturned. New trials were not granted in those cases. The court may have found misconduct for arguments by the prosecutor. However, it was harmless error and those cases were not overturned. The people in my moving papers, I cited People versus Watkins. That is a case with a very similar factual scenario to this one. In that case, the prosecutor asked the defendant on cross-examination a question about him laughing and carrying on outside the presence of the jury. That question was objected to. It was sustained. However, the court ruled in that case there was no misconduct based on the prosecutor having a good faith belief in asking a question that explores the remorse of a defendant for a killing. That is similar to what happened here. I was asking questions to explore the defendant's remorse and the fact that this was not a heat of passion case, that it was a planned killing. So there was no misconduct in this case. I know the defense brought up that the court also committed error. That was not the case here. If the court doesn't believe that there is misconduct, which there was not here, then the court is not required to instruct the jury that there was misconduct. So the court did not commit error in that sense. The court did offer a remedy to the defense, which was striking the questions and the answers. And the defense chose strategically not to do that because the defense wanted to be able to ask Mr. Gulabon further questions on redirect and to be able to argue things in closing, which is what she did. And so the defense can now not come in here and say that there was not a proper remedy by the court when she chose not to take that. The court also has to find that there would be prejudice to the defendant or that there would be a more favorable outcome if those questions had not been asked. And neither of those exist here. There was no prejudice in asking the defendant 2 questions that he was able to explain on his own, and the jury is left to either believe him or not believe him. That is true of all of the questions asked of him and his testimony in general. There would not have been a more favorable outcome here. This is a case where there was overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt, and that was shown through witness testimony, through the crime scene, through his admissions, through video evidence, through audio evidence, through evidence in his vehicle, social media. There was an abundant amount of evidence proving the defendant's guilt. And so 1 or 2 questions asked of him on cross-examination, that does not prejudice him. He certainly received a fair trial in this case. He was able to fully testify and tell his side of the story, and there would not have been a more favorable outcome. What I also attached to my opposition was a declaration from District Attorney Investigator Elliot Schaefer. That's Schaffer. And in that declaration, Mr. Schaefer reiterated the comments made by the jury foreperson after the verdicts. And the jury foreperson indicated that the jury looked at all of the evidence in this case, and they based their verdicts on the defendant's actions and all of the evidence, not on his words on the stand. And so it was certainly evident to the jury that there was not a single question and answer that would have swayed them into changing their verdicts. And so I would argue that there was no misconduct either by the prosecutor or by the court, and that the court should deny the motion for a new trial and proceed with sentencing. Thank you.
May I just briefly respond?
Sure.
Thank you. Just to the last point the prosecution made about Mr. Schaefer having overheard something that the jury foreperson said. I wasn't present, but I do know that Fox 5 News was present. And there was a quote, not just something that they overheard, but a direct quote by the jury foreperson. And it was more complete than what Mr. Schaefer reported in his declaration, which was that immediately after the verdict, foreperson explained that they made their decision based on Mr. Gulabon's actions on the stand when he was testifying, not his words. And so I think what Ms. Brast is missing the point of here is that Mr. Gulabon was put in a position where he had to deny accusations that simply were not true. And when Ms. Brast is standing up with very thorough notes for her cross-examination, and I can't express enough to the court sort of the optics of it, as Ms. Brast has a giant binder that she's checking off question by question by question. And what's left in the juror's mind is an impression that she somehow has information that would exactly corroborate everything that she's asking of Mr. Gulabon, but yet here he is up on the stand denying and lying to them, which is exactly what the jury is asked to do when a defendant testifies. We all know that that jury was absolutely salivating, waiting for Mr. Gulabon to take the stand, to hear what he had to say. And it wasn't a matter of, as we know, what he said, but how he said it. Ms. Brast put Mr. Gulabon in a position where he was forced to deny something that frankly is just not true. And they had no evidence to corroborate it. They had no evidence to bring in to show the jury that what they were in fact asking was true. I don't know if Ms. Brast is unfamiliar with the way a jail works, but they have televisions. They have access to news. They talk to each other. And this case, as we can see in this courtroom right now, was all over the news in October when it happened. The news was constantly speculating about who was involved and what the facts were, and what sort of defense this individual may have. Heat of passion is a very common, well-known defense when someone is charged with the murder of their spouse. So just because Mr. Edwards had some sort of knowledge that this might be a heat of passion case and it involves Mr. Abulaban, a TikTok star, when the media is constantly plastering this all over local news that jail inmates have access to. There is still no credible proof that exists in the transcript of these calls that Mr. Brian Edwards had a conversation with Mr. Abulaban. And if the prosecution thought that was true, when they got these jail calls, they most certainly could have sent an investigator to ask Mr. Edwards about that, but they didn't. And they didn't for good reason, because it simply is not true. And what we have here is a situation where Mr. Abulaban was prejudiced. And we can see that from the jury foreperson's quote to Fox 5 News, that it was not a decision based on his words, but his actions on the stand. Ms. Brax was trying to get a rise out of him. She succeeded by asking him an unsubstantiated question that she simply could not prove. The court offered a remedy that was insufficient to fully address the prejudice and harm already caused to Mr. Abulaban. And based on that, we're asking the court to grant her motion for a new trial.
Well, this is unexpected. It became a completely different type of hearing.
First of all, I have reread the transcripts. The transcripts speak for themselves. To a certain extent, I will adopt my earlier comments on this, quite frankly, when there was a motion for mistrial. There's a few things that we need to talk about here. The first thing is, was there misconduct? That is judged by an objective standard. And here we have a situation where obviously the prosecutor asked a question that, in her mind, which I will accept, she believes was in good faith. It really wasn't answered. Everything kind of stopped at that point. But the question is this in and of itself misconduct? And as I've said earlier, the question should not have been asked, but we have to analyze, well, was this objectively misconduct? And again, I would, based on looking at other cases involving prosecutorial misconduct, no, it doesn't amount to that standard. Again, it was not a very smart thing to say, but again, you ask that, is it misconduct? No. But moving on, this is more important. Did the defendant suffer prejudice? And the answer to that is absolutely not, even if there was misconduct. So we're even assuming that there is prosecutorial misconduct. The question was whether or not these two questions contributed to the verdict. And the answer to that is no, not at all. And I think what you have to do is look at the totality of the circumstances. And if you do that, you'll see that the questions themselves, by themselves, not just didn't have impact on the verdict, were fairly insignificant, Also, we tell the jurors over and over again that the attorney's questions are not evidence. There's a question, it's not evidence. And we, of course, presume that the jurors follow the law. The court did offer various remedies. The defense made certain tactical calls. And here we are today. But the bottom line here is I don't know what the jury foreperson said about the defendant's actions on the stand, but there's no question that if you look again at the totality of the evidence, of which we will outline in review, that's what the jury is looking at. Yes, I would agree with counsel, and I have a quote here that his state of mind and intent were at issue. Of course they were. There's no question about that. But when we look at the defendant's state of mind, we're just not looking about what he says on the stand. We're looking at all of the circumstantial evidence that shows his state of mind. And that's what the jury did. And the jury came up with their verdict. They basically had the choice of whether or not this was a willful, deliberate, and premeditated, for lack of a better word, cold-blooded murder, or whether or not this was heat of passion, which is basically a lapse in judgment under extreme circumstances. The defendant was on the stand for 3 days. I've been doing this for a long time, probably my 37th year. I have never seen anybody on the stand for 3 days. So the jury had an extraordinary amount of time to evaluate the defendant's credibility. And the idea that it would come down to, again, 2 insignificant questions is just not, it's not reasonable. So based on the 2 prongs of was this misconduct? No. And again, was there prejudice? No. Moving on to whether or not this court made an error in refusing to either grant the mistrial or finding some other remedy, for lack of a better word. I had suggested at the time that we simply strike it because, again, the jurors are presumed to follow the law. And it's been my experience they do. I gave the defense the options to this because I think that's only fair. And for certain tactical reasons, they elected their remedy. Obviously, they don't like the verdict the way it came back, but elections have to be made. So based on all of this, then, the defense motion for a mistrial is denied. All right, so now we will go on to Madam Prosecutor. I have the prosecution go first because I always give the defendant the last.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I would like to start with the victim impact statements. There are several members of the family present here in court today, and some family also in Microsoft Teams who would like to make impact statements. I would just let the court know I did submit numerous victim impact statements from both friends and family of both Anna and Ray. I know the court has had an opportunity to read those. Many of those members are here in court today. Not everyone will give their impact statement again, but there are some family members that would like to, and I will just go in order.
Okay, so now we get to the actual sentencing that we came for. No way, teacup.
Ma'am, please state your first and last name and spell both of those names for the record.
Yeah, Hermes. Sorry.
It's not me. It's not me.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Man, if you're not.
Oh my God.
Sorry, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh my God. I'm not the one stopping it, you guys.
What my mom did to you? What Alan did to you? My mom treated you well. Sorry, Your Honor.
Holy shit.
What did they do to you? You didn't do anything to you.
I fucking did to her, man.
You know it's wrong. You know I have a reason. It's not gonna go cheap. You can get cheap first.
Man, if you're not going to be able to control yourself.
Sorry, Your Honor. This feeling is like make you sick.
It's probably her mom, the victim's mom.
Your Honor, my name is Hermes Harden. And I want to share the court the devastating impact that loss of my sister Anna Marie
Sister.
has had on our lives. My sister was a gentle, loving, sweet, young woman whose absence has left a hole in my heart that can never be filled. This man has taken her life and also shattered the hearts and lives of so many loved Anna Marie. Anna Marie was not only my sister, but also one of my best friends. Our childhood was filled with laughter, love, and countless moments of joy. My favorite memories with my sister were of us growing up together. Her beautiful smile and laughter always made us happy. As we grew up, I can remember so many fun times when our family would get together because her presence was, I can remember so fun times when our family would get together because our presence was always so uplifting. She always thought of others first before she would take care of herself. She was always very uplifting to those around her. She had such a gentle spirit, kind, and could easily find joy in the simplest of things. She brought joy and happiness to all those around her. And until now, I still have a hard time knowing my sister is gone. No more calls, birthdays, Christmas, and Mother's Day texts and calls for her. Looking at my sister pictures and video with her is now just a distant memory. Ali didn't take piece of her heart, but also beautiful soul, inside and out. My sister was the most loving, patient, gentle, and forgiving person. And this person took her away from us. He was the one who was supposed to protect his wife and the child, but instead, he made them scared and even terrified of him. Throughout the trial, he pretended to be surprised that Anna Marie wanted to leave him. As you can see, my sister tried so hard to forgive him and have him so many chances and covered all his abuse and lies. She did not even tell me about the abuse just to protect him. But he took advantage of her and kept abusing her anyways. But he lived at our family's when he lived at the family house and also on the phone. He talked like an angel and promised he would never hurt my sister. And Ali, if I had known what my sister had been through with all the abuse, if I had known, I would have flown again to see her and do my best to take her and get her away from you. You didn't take away my sister's life, but also my niece's future because of your selfishness. The damage you have caused impossible to measure. And my parents trusted you when you brought Anna Marie and Amira from the Philippines to the States. You promised my mom that you would take good care of them, as my parents did for Anna Marie and Amira back in the Philippines. But I had no idea that my sister's life would be miserable living with you. Treated my sister like she didn't matter, but she mattered. We love and miss her so much. My sister wanted the best for you and Anna Marie, but you messed up, Ali. And you messed up. The person who said good things about you was my sister. I can imagine how this evil act has changed all of our lives, especially Amira's life. Amira lost the two people that were supposed to love and care for her, especially her favorite person and loving mother. You took that away from Amira. But of the people you killed had a beautiful life ahead. Many people love and care for both of them. You ruined so many people's lives because of your selfish action. You were the one who messed up, and now you are trying to make people believe you're a victim in this case. I knew when I first met you in the Philippines that you were not a good fit for my sister. After you disrespected my mother in front of me, and I should have followed my instinct. Only you know how many years my sister suffered from your hands. but she still tried to stay and love you, hoping that you will change. I told you before that if you didn't want her, you could have brought my sister back to us. You could have brought my sister back and Amira back to us. But you made a choice. You made your choice. I'm not realizing why she was afraid to visit us, even though we're just like a few hours away. It is because you were controlling her and Amira, so they couldn't tell how evil you were. And Amira and Amira were planning to visit us in December 2021 for family gathering, but you didn't give my sister that chance. Nobody deserved to be treated like you treated my sister. You ruined her life, you mocked her, you disrespected her, you abused her, you control her, and then you kill her. You killed the only person who cared for you and loved you. In your honor, the loss of Anna Marie is an unimaginable tragedy for our family. Her death has left us all heartbroken. A family gathering feel empty without her laughter and her presence. Her daughter Amira had lost a loving and nurturing mother, and we lost a sister, a daughter, and a friend. The pain of her absence is the constant reminder of emptiness that you can never be filled. We wake up every day wishing that this nightmare was just a bad dream. But the reality that we are forced now to live without her. The trauma of losing my sister in such horrific is something we will carry with us forever. No sentence can ever bring my sister back to us. But we hope that justice will be served and that the person responsible for the highest crime will be held accountable. We hope that through this statement you can understand the depth of our loss and lasting impact it has had on our lives. For me, the death penalty is what this man deserved. He has no more place on this earth, but I would agree with what my parents say, a life sentence without parole. Thank you for allowing our family to have a voice and for considering the profound impact this loss has had on our family. Thank you, Edward. Oh,
Well, that was very intense.
And now she's going to read a statement from Anna's mother,
Oh,
Molly
gosh.
Miller, AMALIA.
Your Honor, hello, I am Amalia Miller, the mother of Anna Maria Bulaban, the wife of Ali Bulaban. I cannot fully comprehend why Ali would kill my daughter. The pain.
Oh my gosh, this is absolutely heartbreaking.
Where am I? The pain is unbearable, and I cannot accept what happened to her. As her mother, I knew my daughter well. She was a kind and loving child who never caused me any trouble. She was a caring parent, a thoughtful sister, and always cheerful and playful. Her loss is incredibly painful. Painful for me as a mother. The impact of what happened has left me devastated. I cannot sleep when I think about her. My only prayer now is for justice to be served for my daughter and for the person responsible to be punished. We ask for justice and for life sentence without parole for Ali Bulaban. Only then will I and my family find some peace of mind. It is also painful for me to know that my granddaughter will grow up without her mother. Every time I remember, I cannot help but cry. And I have lost my appetite. My prayers are my only source of strength, and I pray for the end of this mourning for my daughter. I love her dearly, and the pain is overwhelming. I pray for the strength to cope with this agony, I rely on the Lord to help me end this pain and longing, as does my family. I am grateful for the answered prayers, and I hope my plea for Alia Bulaman punishment, life imprisonment without the possibility of release, will be heard. I trust that you will listen to my request. Sincerely, Molly Miller.
Okay, next it will be Maria Cardenas. You'd like to
Wow.
make your statement? My son Ray was a good man, hardworking.
This is the other victim.
noble, without malice. A good son, brother, grandson, uncle, nephew, and friend. Full of light, with a whole life ahead of him that had so much to live still. I, as a mother, ask of you to be just and give Ali Abulaban a sentence of life in prison for taking the life of my son and his friend Anna in such a cruel and coward way. For him to pay the unbearable damages that he has caused us. Please free us from suffering this agony and despair, and give us full and legitimate justice that our soul, mind, and broken hearts from such pain need. The loss of my son has left unimaginable pain and a huge hole in my heart and soul. Your Honor, we thank you for your attention. Okay, next, Jordana Barrett.
My name is Jordana Barrett. And Rayburn was my brother. I address this court to you to express how the crime committed by the defendant has affected not only me, but all family members and friends. He had a beautiful soul, and this is why I know he is resting in peace. But losing him has left me feeling empty and with a lot of emotional damage. I lost my baby brother and my best friend. The way he had to leave this earth is not something that he deserved. He was a kind, loving person. He deserved a chance in this life. He always wanted to be a father and have a family and live a happy life. And all of that was robbed from him. What the defendant has done with this horrible crime has destroyed our family. Our holidays will never be the same because we are missing a big part of it. This grief and sadness will never be the same because we are missing a big part of it. Okay. Because we are never going to be able to hug our brother on Christmas, on New Year's, or on his birthday. I know how much he loved being with all of his family on all holidays. He never missed a family gathering. So I'm here today to ask for justice for my brother Ray, for Anna, and for my mom, who has to suffer the rest of her life knowing that her youngest son and her baby was taken from her in such a violent way. And that is something that no mother should ever have to go through. The defendant deserves to pay for this horrible crime with the highest sentence possible. He has destroyed many lives and victims deserve justice. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Elizabeth Barrett, you next.
Your Honor, my name is Elizabeth Barrett, and Rayburn Barrett was my baby brother. Even though Ray was the youngest of the five of us, he was very responsible and mature from a young age. A true gentleman, always respectful. He was the most loving and kind person to everyone, family, friends, partners, even strangers, no matter the age. He He loved to spend time with family and friends. Even if he could not be there in person, he would take time to reach out by call or message. In every family event, he would go around and have a moment with each and every one of us, from the oldest to the youngest. His motto was family comes first. He was a peacemaker, always bringing us together. He was loved by many people and he touched the hearts of everyone that had the privilege of meeting him. There was not an ounce of bad in him, always trying to help others, even animals. We were not allowed to kill even a spider in his presence. He would kindly just remove it from our home and safely take it outside back to nature. Many of us suffer domestic violence or traumas in our lives, but we choose to be different, to be better. Ray did. He was a great son, brother, cousin, nephew, grandson, friend. And he would have been a great husband and father had the opportunity not be taken away from him. We appreciate and thank all the hard work that the DA team did and the jury for the fair verdict decision that they made. It has taken every strength left in us to be present at court for almost a month and hear and see things that will forever haunt our minds and hearts. But we felt it was important to show our support for everyone that has been hurt with these horrible crimes and see that justice is served. We often are told that we are such a strong family for surviving such tragedy. But the reality is that this has been the most difficult event we have ever experienced, and many of us are left broken. The pain and trauma of losing a brother the way we did is so painful that we have difficulty living a normal and healthy life. Some of us are struggling with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares, and more. It has been almost 3 years since our loved ones were taken away from us, and we have not been able to have closure waiting for this trial. Just when we feel it's possible to move on and have peace of mind after the verdict, we hear about the intentions of the defendant to ask for even more time in a new trial. Albeit Boulevard not only took the lives of 2 good people, but he also took part of everyone's life that knew Ray and Anna. He did not give Ray or Anna any time to defend themselves or a chance to continue their lives. He does not deserve any more consideration or compassion. That's why we ask with all our hearts that you consider our pain and suffering and deny any further requests from him. Please give us all the justice we deserve so we can finally start healing and find peace in our hearts. Thank you, Mr.
And next will be Sylvia.
My name is Olga Barron. I am Ray's aunt. And I say I am glad for Ray's aunt because I didn't have her. I chose not to see him when he passed to the other life. Because I don't want to remember him that way. I remember him for the kind, loving, good man that he was to everyone. My brother Oswaldo was Ray's dad. Dad is a term that Ali Abulaban will never be referred to, will be referred by. The tragedy that he has brought into our lives cannot be described, no matter how hard I try. The pain and suffering of others is something that you have absolutely no clue about, Ali Abulaban. You are the only one that matters. I understand they're preparing you for life in prison. And I ask myself, who prepared any of us that loved Ray so much to live life without him? From the moment I received
Finally,
the
they
call
show
from
the
my
defendant.
niece Lisbeth, Ray's sister,
He keeps
I
talking.
refused to accept the reality. What I was hearing, it just did not make sense.
He's such a punk.
And I kept thinking, this only happens in movies, it happens in maybe in other people's lives, not in ours. Suddenly, all I could think about was my dear sister-in-law, Lupita, Ray's mother.
Look at him staring her down. What a
As a
punk.
mother myself, how could any of us others know accept that we lose a child in such a way that is making no sense. No one will ever grieve more the loss of a child than a mother. Just a few months before, Ray, along with all of his cousins and brothers, spearheaded a Mother's Day celebration for their grandmother, my mother, who is now 91 years old, who to this day believes that Ray died of a heart attack because we had to keep it away from her, the horrible, horrible murder that he died by. I couldn't make myself, like I said, see him in his coffin. I will hang on to that sweet image of him making over his mother, his grandmother. He was a perfect nephew, the perfect brother, the perfect citizen. He was a great man, something you won't ever, ever know what it's about. Hollywood Boulevard. How many victims did your cowardice leave behind? Let's start with your own family. The disgrace of being related to a criminal that will hopefully rot in jail. Your mother who will see you die day by day in prison.
Ooh,
You won't be dead.
the shade. I love it.
But you will also not be living. And then there's Amira, poor child. Not even your own daughter, now an orphan, mattered to you. And let's not forget Anna's mother and sister and all of the family who also lost a granddaughter, a niece. And then there are all the wonderful friends that Ray and Anna had. Your sick narcissism cut short two beautiful lives at their prime and left a devastation of broken hearts on Ray's and Anna's side, and your side as well. And I hope that you will get the maximum sentence, what you deserve. You deserve no better. Thank you, Your Honor.
When you see how he's staring
There should
them
be one
down,
more speaker. Let me make
know
sure
why
who's on Teams.
they get more angry.
All right, while you're doing that, to the victim's family, there's something that I like to point out in these circumstances. Because it's often not understood. Sure. Is the sentence pronounced today does not reflect the value of your loved ones, the value of human life. It can't do that. And I want to emphasize that the sentence today does not reflect your love for them or their value as human beings. It's society's only way to punish people who have done wrong. But it obviously cannot restore their lives. The only thing this court can do in society in general is to take away his freedom. But that's it. And I just want to point that out because oftentimes people think that the sentence that is handed down is a reflection of either the crime or the person who is now deceased. And that's just not true. I just want to point that out to you so that you understand.
Not a reflection of the crime?
Thank you.
That's-
Next statement will be from Ron Miller.
All right, this is Ron Miller. I'm the father of Anna Marie. My wife and I received a phone call from one of Anna Marie's friends from San Diego back in the day of the murder. And nobody knew what happened. They just knew that they just almost said they couldn't get in to see Anna Marie. The apartment was surrounded by police. So I called the San Diego Police Department from the Philippines here where we live. But I was informed that even though I'm the father and the mother is right here with me, that they could not give us any information over the phone. They couldn't tell us anything. And I gave them the name of our daughter in New Mexico so they could call her. And my gut already knew what happened. I already knew that she had been murdered. And we just waited for the final word from our daughter when they got the word from the police department that she was murdered. kind of off script here a little bit. Please understand, this is extremely hard. We had Anna Marie's body returned here to the Philippines, where we could lay her to rest here, and we go and visit her once a week. We go to the cemetery and visit with her. We haven't got over this. Imagine if you get her, maybe you can't, but how I feel about losing my youngest child to the man that promised to love and take care of her and her granddaughter. And he ends up murdering her. My wife and I, we tried to understand why, or what could we have done to change the outcome of this. Watching the trial, hearing the verdict of guilty and first-degree murder does bring some closure. But I would love to see a sentence of life in prison without parole. This is what this guy needs. I don't consider him a man. A man would not do this. But I hope he gets life in prison without parole. I want him to rot in prison for what he done to my daughter. She was a beautiful, loving woman. She done everything for everybody else, always putting herself flat. I ask you to please take into account all the consequences of the suffering that we as the victims and the family of the victims have gone through and continue to go through because the choice is made by this person. I believe right now that the defendant is a danger to the community. He knew what he was doing from the first moment that he started abusing Anna Marie. And I ask you, please don't forget who the victims are here, because he is not. He deserves to be punished after terrifying and abusing Anna Marie and his daughter, who witnessed so much of that abuse, and for making us live in this deep pain for the rest of our life. He doesn't deserve mercy, since he has no mercy for my daughter Anna Marie. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, for listening to all the impact statements. I would ask the court to sentence the defendant consecutively on this case for counts 1 and 2. I did, in my brief, cite a case, People versus Garnica, that stands for the fact that the court can impose consecutive life without parole sentences for each murder. Since there are 2 murders here, there's no murder more deserving than another for the LWOP sentence or a state sentence, and so I would ask the court to sentence the defendant consecutively. Count 1, LWOP, life without parole, plus 25 years to life for the enhancement, and a consecutive LWOP sentence on count 2 with another consecutive 25 to life sentence for the enhancement. I laid all of the aggravating factors in this case out in my brief. I would ask the court not to strike any of the enhancements. The aggravating factors here far outweigh any mitigating in the fact that this crime involved great violence, it involved death, it involved the use of a firearm, it involved 2 vulnerable victims who were unarmed. The defendant took advantage of a position of trust, using a key card to enter an apartment he no longer was living in. These were planned crimes, planned executions, not heat of passion crimes. And the defendant has shown that he has exhibited violent conduct, proving he's a danger to society. So for all of the aggravating factors here, I would ask the court not only not to strike any enhancements, but to give the defendant a sentence of consecutive LWOP terms. I would also ask for restitution. There is a victim compensation board claim for $12,890. That is for the funeral expenses for both Anna and Ray. There are also 2 other requests. Amalia Miller and Ron Miller, Anna's parents, live in the Philippines. They had to get a visa to fly out here. That was quite a lengthy process. They wanted to be out here for the trial. They did fly out here. The trial ended up being continued after they were here. That flight cost was $3,324.24. The other request for restitution is to Hermé Sartin, HERMAE SARTIN. She had to fly out here 3 times, once for the funeral, once to take care and close up Anna's apartment and take the items from the apartment, and then flew here for sentencing to represent the family and make an impact statement. That amount requested is $1,214.66. Under Penal Code 1202.4, families of victims are entitled to economic losses. That includes economic losses for trial. I can give the court a citation to People versus Chrysler.
I'll tell you what, today is really not the day to talk about this. Counsel, will your client waive his right to be present in a restitution hearing, and we can sort this out at a later date?
Your Honor, I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Boulevard prior to beginning the sentencing. He is prepared to stipulate to the restitution being sought by the prosecution.
Okay.
Thank you. So the people would ask those amounts be ordered, also for the court to reserve restitution for any remaining amounts or counseling that is sought in the future. I would ask the court, as the victims that have asked, for the maximum sentence. That is the only sentence that will properly punish this defendant, prevent his future crimes, deter others, and protect the community. After judgment in this case, I have informed all parties that people are filing a Penal Code Section 1203.01 statement. That's a packet that gets sent to CDCR with the defendant. Thank you.
Your Honor, we just want to start off by saying that Mr. Boulevard and his defense team and everyone involved in representing him does have great sympathy and empathy for the victims of this case and their loss. Hearing their words, it is unimaginable the pain and suffering that they're experiencing. But I think the court's comments reflect very sadly what is the reality, in that what they are actually seeking and what they really want, very sadly, they will never have, which is their family members returned to them. And what we have to do here is decide what is a fair and just punishment, not only based on the crime that was committed, but also judging the person who was accused and ultimately convicted of this crime. While we have expressed remorse and sympathy for the victims, it's also important to understand who Mr. Boulevard is. We know that makes common sense and is common knowledge that we as people are a product of the environments in which we grow up, the environments in which we spend our formative years learning how to respond to emotional crises, how to properly reflect on our decisions and the consequences of our decisions. And when someone is exposed to the type of violence that Mr. Boulevard was exposed to as a child, it leaves an imprint. As we know, again, it's common sense, but we know this from the literature, it leaves an imprint on the human mind. And Mr. Boulevard is someone who I think the court can see from his mother's testimony, from the doctor's testimony, and from his own testimony. He is someone who was fundamentally and is fundamentally stunted emotionally. He is someone who suffers from extreme mental illness that for the majority of his life went undiagnosed and untreated. He is someone who, because of the impact of the violence and trauma that he experienced growing up, that left this imprint that formed him into the person that he is, because of the mental illness that was left unchecked and went raging throughout his brain, developed an extreme addiction to cocaine that also then had an impact on the decisions that he made, in particular leading up to the incident and on the day of the incident. And while we respect the verdict that was handed down by the jury, we still believe that Mr. Boulevon was acting under a heat of passion when he committed the crimes that he did. We are asking the court to consider all of the evidence that it heard, both from the prosecution's witnesses, as well as the defense witnesses, as well as from Mr. Boulevon, from his family, from his friends, from the people who knew him and loved him as a son, as a father, as a friend, as a brother, as a husband. With all of his flaws and all of the terrible decisions and reactions that he had, we are asking this court to sentence him to a just sentence, imposing the court's hands are tied with the ultimate sentence of life without parole, but I would ask the court to run the life without parole concurrently. I would also ask the court to strike the punishment on the 12022.53D. I don't think that there's any justification for imposing an additional 25 to life on each count, given that Mr. Boulevon, based on what is the anticipated sentence, will spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. And we are asking the court to make this tough decision, but the just decision and the right decision in sentencing Mr. Boulevon. Thank you.
Mr. Boulevon,
Yes, sir.
if you want to make a statement, this is the time.
Your Honor, I have something for you.
Okay.
May I face?
Sure.
Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. Mind your manners. Wild thing.
Good morning, everyone. In a situation like this, there really isn't much a person can say that can help make things better. Losing a loved one to senseless and unnecessary violence isn't something that anyone should have to go through. And yet it has happened. And here I am being the reason why multiple families have had to experience it. I can't say that I'm proud of that. Throughout this trial, many horrific things were displayed. And as we sat here for weeks having to endure some of the most disturbing audio recordings and video footage, I sat there in silence, listening, watching, and being reminded of the worst moments of my life. Having to hear myself say some of the most vile, shocking, and hateful things to the woman I loved was not easy. In fact, I couldn't help but at times close my eyes and cover my ears, because that's not who I am. My behavior was disgusting and completely unacceptable. So when the time came for me to take the stand, I tried as best as I could to help make some sense of all this. To explain that everything you all saw in the last few months leading up to this incident was a horrific result of the tragic downfall to a once beautiful relationship. But even so, in those 3 days that I took the stand, I was able to share and say a lot of things, except the one thing I wanted to say the most. I am so incredibly sorry to each and every one of you who have been affected by this. I cannot imagine the pain that I've caused your families. I saw the look on all your faces and the tears in your eyes, and I hate that I'm the reason for it. On that day of October 21st, 2021, I was in the worst physical and mental state of my life. I was sick, suffering from an untreated severe mental illness that was combined with a crippling drug addiction, which put me in a state of a drug-induced psychosis. My response in that moment was an unintended, impulsive reaction against my better judgment to the discovery of Ray's romantic involvement with my wife. And for that, I'm sorry.
He feels justified.
I'm sorry that in that moment, I was not mentally strong enough to control myself.
He feels justified.
I'm sorry that my horrendous action that day resulted in the undeserved deaths of Rayburn Barone and Anna Marie Abulabon.
Exactly. What was that?
My partner, my best friend, the mother of my daughter, and the love of my life. I am ashamed of what took place.
You can't say love of your life when you.
I am devastated by the damage that I've caused to Anna's family, to Ray's family, and to my family. If I could undo all of this, I wouldn't hesitate. If I could go back to that day, I would have left for LA first thing in the morning as I had originally planned. I would have given Anna the space she wanted, and I would have used that time to focus on getting the proper help I so desperately needed. And I would get on my knees and beg Anna for forgiveness. Forgiveness for becoming distracted, for letting my anxiety and my insecurities affect my thoughts and my behavior towards Anna and towards her friends. Forgiveness for using cocaine as a remedy and becoming addicted because of it. For neglecting my responsibilities to you, Anna, as your husband, and my responsibilities as a father. And for allowing the drugs to turn me into a pathetic empty shell of the man that she fell in love. Because of those factors, I lost myself. And because of those factors, I lost Anna. I am so deeply sorry to each and every one of you who have suffered for the last 3 years. To the Cardenas Marone family, to Ray's mother and father, I am so sorry for what I've done to your son. To Jordana and his siblings, I am so sorry for what I've done to your brother. I really wish I could have gotten to know Ray the way that you all do, the way his friends did. And now, after seeing just how consistently you all showed up to this trial in support of him, I have no doubt in my mind that Ray was a good person. The world has truly suffered a great loss, and for that, I'm terribly sorry. I wish this never happened. To Anna Marie's family, whom I still love and consider to be my family. There's so much I want to say. To Anna's mother, Amalia, and to Ron, you trusted me to protect your daughter, and I failed you. I wish there was something more I could offer besides an apology. I wish there was a way for me to fix this. I'm so truly sorry for what I've done to Anna, her parents, her siblings, aunts, and her uncles. I feel terrible. Anna was the most beautiful woman I've ever met, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. To love and cherish her, never to hurt her, to build her up, not to break her down. But I feel. I am thankful, however, that Anna and I were able to have a child, a granddaughter for both of our families to rejoice with. It is my belief that the love and spirit that Anna radiated will continue on through her. To Amira, my beloved daughter. Amira, when you're old enough to see this, please don't blame yourself. None of this is your fault. Your mom loved you so much, and I love you so much. You are the strongest girl I have ever known, and I am so proud to be your father. I'm sorry for what my foolish actions have costed you, from what's been taken from you. I'm sorry that now you not only have to grow up without your mother, but now you have to grow up without your father too. I'm ashamed. But that is why I will strive each and every day to better myself, to seek rehabilitation, and to hopefully one day come back home to you. Because not being a part of your daily life tears me apart. To the Honorable Judge Frazier, I want to thank you for being extremely fair to me throughout this trial and for giving me the opportunity to defend myself. It is truly unfortunate that despite the compelling evidence that this was a crime of passion, somehow the jury still landed on this verdict, and they certainly wasted no time in doing so. The fact that I spent more time on the stand than the jury took to deliberate my fate is very concerning. In fact, the jury foreman himself told Fox 5 News reporters that a few of the jurors wanted to pick second degree, but were pressured not to by the rest of the jury. I think that speaks for itself, loud and clear, that reasonable doubt was intentionally overlooked, and that justice was not the motivating factor behind the decision. It was vengeance. And now I am left with no other option but to spend the rest of my life in prison, death by incarceration. a very slow and drawn out death sentence. That means in 50 years from now, should I still be alive, I would still not be considered for release. I don't think that's fair at all. Especially after it has been made clear that drugs and alcohol were involved. And add that to, along with infidelity and mental illness, and you've got a recipe for disaster. One that anyone could fall into. It's happened to me and I still can't believe it. Being sent to prison without the hope of ever getting out honestly feels like I'm being sent to hell. And that's terrifying. And I don't think that's right either. Personally, I believe everyone should have the ability to parole because everyone has the ability to change. But nonetheless, even still, it is my goal to serve my time with the utmost outstanding conduct and to participate in every rehabilitative program while being a positive role model to other prisoners. And I will do all this to the best of my ability with the goal of one day safely transitioning back into society. And finally, to everyone else, I extend my deepest apology from the bottom of my heart. I'm sorry. I wish you all peace, healing, love, and abundant joy in your future. I will continue to pray that I may earn your forgiveness. Thank you.
Good for you, it's still trying to pack him up. It's good for you.
First, we'll take care of some preliminary matters. As a matter of law, the defendant is ineligible for probation. But if he was eligible for probation, this court would not give him probation. The court acknowledges its discretion and obligation at reviewing verdicts from when we get first-degree murders to see if it's second-degree or even voluntary manslaughter. And I will explain also, as the defense has asked, that I have the authority to strike or reduce the gun enhancements. I also have the authority to run the LWOP sentences consecutive or concurrent. Let me kind of briefly go through that and why I am giving the sentence that I am giving. First of all, as to the first-degree murder, I look at various factors, having sat through the trial. And I do this in every murder trial.
Camera
And I don't take
guy.
this lightly. I truly respect jury verdicts. Have I reduced a first-degree murder to second degree? I have. In fact, I did it 2 weeks ago. But I'm not doing it today. And I'll explain why it's not happening today. Very simple reason. The jury heard all of the evidence. The jury evaluated all of the evidence. The jury came back with a first-degree verdict, which was the correct verdict. It was a verdict that, when you look at the totality of all that happened during this particular crime, it's the only verdict a reasonable person could come up with. And considering all the evidence, and I'll just hit a few high points that I think honestly the jury was looking at. The defendant's text message to his cousin about killing. Defendant's controlling demeaning behavior. He said just a few minutes ago, he wants us to know who he is. That's who he is. It's very clear from the videos. This driving over to the apartment with a loaded gun. The fact that the victims were helpless, completely taken by surprise. The planning of a listening device. Firing within seconds of entering the apartment. Clearly showing an intent to kill. Not heat of passion. Willful, deliberate, premeditated, cold-blooded murder. And something that is hard to explain. Ray was not involved in their problems at all. But he shot Ray first. Shot him in the head. In an intent to kill. You don't shoot people in the head unless you want to kill them. And in front of Anna. That was deliberate. He wanted her to see it. Very cruel. He took photos immediately afterwards. Who does that? Calls his mother. He had 3 days on the stand to explain his actions. He explained it. And the jurors came up again with the only reasonable verdict, which is a first-degree verdict. They also found, because there was 2 deaths, that this was multiple murder. Penal Code Section 190.283. The next thing this court has to consider is the gun enhancements. In the state of California, the legislature has, both slowly and quickly, changed certain enhancements. And the court is obligated to look at reducing certain enhancements, including those that require or have a 20-plus year addition to the sentence. And again, I look at both mitigating and aggravating factors. Of course, it goes without saying this crime involved great violence, it involved a firearm, it involved vulnerable witnesses, victims who, again, had no time to react, no time to defend themselves. It involved planning. I don't think you could say it was sophistication or professionalism, but it certainly involved planning. When you load a gun, arm yourself with a gun, drive 10 or 15 minutes to an apartment complex, as we saw on video, his demeanor going up the elevator, his demeanor going down the elevator, that showed planning. And obviously it was he took advantage of a position of trust. Clearly. Yeah, she didn't know he had a key, but he took advantage of that. Now, there are certain factors that, as for mitigating factors under the rules of court, I don't find any. Zero. None. There are certain factors with the defendant that I am obligated to take a look at. I acknowledge he has no prior record. I acknowledge the fact that at the time of this killing, he was suffering substance abuse and had some mental health issues. But I reject the fact that his childhood contributed to this at all. I hear terrible childhoods day in and day out. And his was not ideal, but it wasn't what we hear in this particular court. And I don't think that any of these crimes were connected, in fact, to his mental health or even his substance abuse. He was over 26. It did involve intimate partner violence, but he was the one that was committing the violence on her. And of course, he denied when confronted with it what happened initially. So the court is not going to strike or reduce the gun enhancements. The question then becomes one of whether or not these life without possibility of parole should be consecutive or concurrent. And that's a big deal. That will, in all likelihood, determine whether or not he dies in prison or out of prison, whether he dies a free man or one who's not. And this is the bottom line on this is I've watched him here during all of this time. He's a very talented actor. He is a very talented actor. when I saw the Scarface videos, it's as if when he committed these crimes, he became that persona of Scarface. Just cold-blooded killing without remorse. Any tears that he's cried in this courtroom have been for himself. They are not for A&M. It's just, that's the reality. He fears the consequences, as he should, of his actions. But as he sits here today, I don't know if he's really sorry. I have serious reservations about it. I know he's sorry about the consequences of going to prison for the rest of his life. But I can't say that I think he's sorry for having killed these two innocent human beings. He's a very selfish person, as I think the jury saw. That was something that his character kind of came through when we asked, who is Ali Abulaban? That's who he is. He's somebody that is only thinking about himself, and the idea of killing two innocent people doesn't disturb him. It's chilling. So the bottom line here is he will die in prison. He will never be a free man. He will take his last breath. In this matter,
Come on.
defendant on count 1 will be sentenced to life without the possibility of probation via penal code section 1190.2, parent A, parent 3. Consecutive to that will be 25 years to life on the gun enhancement under penal code section 1222.53D. Consecutive to count 1 will be count 2, which will be life without the possibility of parole. Penal code section 190.2, parent A 3. Consecutive to that will be the gun enhancement of 25 to life under penal code section 1222.53D. Total prison term, 50 years to life plus no law. Life without possibility of parole. Is given the following custody credits: 1,552 days. He is given the following fines and fees.
Your Honor, probation has credits of 1,052 as of today.
Okay, 1,052. He will pay a restitution fine of 10,000 under penal code section 1202.4B. Court security fee of 80 under penal code section 1465.8. Criminal conviction fee of 60. The general order of restitution. Restitution at today's time will be set at for the funeral expenses of $12,890. And what was your other restitution amounts?
Just so the record is clear, that $12,890 is to the Victim Compensation Board.
Correct.
The amount to Amalia Miller is $3,324.24.
We can cancel that, Mr.
I can't, please don't interrupt. Go ahead.
And the amount to Hermé Sarton is $1,214.66.
All right, those announcements also. All right, thank you all.
Your Honor, may I just want to make one clarification. When the court announced the sentence, 50 to life plus LWOP, is that plus 2 terms of LWOP, 1 for each count?
As I indicated, the counts 1 and 2 on LWOP under the special circumstances alleged and pled improvement under penal code section 190.2, parent A, are consecutive to each other.
Thank you.
That's 2 consecutive LWOP terms, plus on each count, 25 to life, totaling 50 to life, plus LWOP. So yes, they are consecutive to each other.
Thank you.
He's burning.
Yeah.
He's burning.
All right.
He's seething with anger. He feels betrayed. He feels burdened. He feels it was totally unfair. You can see that in his body language. What a punk. What a fucking punk. Sorry for my language, but my God. All right. So we're gonna go back. I think that was a very just sentence. The outburst from the family was a little much, not gonna lie. It was a little much, but very, very understandable. You have to realize a lot of these victims as well, they also have untreated mental instability. I don't want to say illness, but a lot of them do too. And a lot of times that mental instability causes the inability to hold one's emotions in really intense situations under a lot of stress. And that's what I was seeing there was just, it must have been absolutely harrowing for them to be in the same room with the man who actually murdered their family member. And that's a really difficult situation to walk into, especially when you haven't been taught how to deal with it. So I understand the outburst, but it was kind of whoa, not gonna lie. So what I did in the supermarket trial is I skipped past the law enforcement testimony because it's really, they were testifying to videos that we couldn't see, and it was just too hard to follow. And in all honesty, it's not that the details of the actual day or what they would share is going to be disputed. We all know this man did it. It's more about, is he going to is he going to get an insanity situation? Is he going to be able to prove insanity was part of why he did it? That's the key issue here, not like the facts that the police are going to bring out, at least that I know of. So this particular witness is definitely someone who is not law enforcement. I haven't figured out exactly who it is yet, but let's listen.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to get settled. If you need a cup of water, you can take some water, okay? If you need tissues at any point, those are to your right.
Okay.
Okay. And that microphone in front of you allows everybody in the courtroom to hear you. So I'm the only one right now who's going to be asking you questions.
Okay.
But in order for everybody to hear you, you could speak into the mic. That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. What's your name?
It's Moonshadow. I go by Sarah.
Okay. So you go by Sarah Moonshadow.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you spell your last name?
Moonshadow.
And when you say your name is Moonshadow, your actual birth name is Moonshadow.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your background just to get you settled in and so the jury gets to know you a little bit better before we talk about what happened at King Soopers, okay?
Okay.
How old are you, ma'am?
I'm 45.
Are you currently employed?
Yes and no. I'm employed and currently don't have any caseloads. So
let's talk about that. What do you do for work generally?
I'm in home health care
How long have you been in home health care for?
my whole life since I was 19.
And do you have kids?
I do.
How many kids do you have?
3 boys and a girl.
What are their names?
Nicholas, Joseph, Ash, and Shiloh.
What's Nicholas's last name?
Edwards.
Nicholas Edwards.
Yeah, after his grandmother.
How old is Nicholas approximately?
He's 25.
Where are you currently living? What neighborhood or area?
In South Boulder.
And with whom do you live currently?
Right now, I'm looking for places, so it's kind of a bouncing around thing, mostly just because it's when I feel most secure.
And the work you do in home health care, what does that involve?
I travel to people's houses and I was primary in spinal and head trauma. in Denver, but in Boulder, it's mostly elder care, dementia, and things of that nature.
So what does that mean in terms of the work you do? Like you show up at someone's house and what do you do?
Life Auxiliary, I basically make sure that they're, you know, happy and healthy. And if there's any issues that I see, you know, I make note of it, you know, kind of head off hospital stays and hospice care and, you know, make life, you know, fun.
And you've been doing that work since you were 19 years old?
Yeah,
Do you recall March 22nd, 2021?
I do.
What were you doing that day before you went to King Soopers?
We were around the corner at the laundry mat, and I was getting ready for work. I had a client that was local in the area, so I was scrambling to try to make sure that I was prepared because it was my second day back after fracturing my pelvis. And just being a normal, everyday, you know, single mom getting the thing done, you know.
Who were you with at that point?
I was with my son. I was scrambling to try to get the laundry done before I got to work and had to run back to my house. And so I told Nicholas that I needed to stop by the store to make sure I had gas money and everything ready for work. And I mean, we weren't even, it was kind of just like a, you know, spontaneous stop in, like that. I was more worried that it was going to run me late. You know, I didn't think that it was going to turn as crazy as it did, you know, going to the store every day. Like, so usually pretty boring.
Can I ask you some other questions about what you just shared?
Mm-hmm.
What laundromat were you at? Where was the laundromat located?
It was just around the back of the building, on the left side of the store.
The left side of King Soopers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you were there with Nicholas.
Yes, I was.
And the two of you, I assume, were doing your laundry.
Yeah. I was in a hurry, so I decided I would use the facility instead of our neighborhood laundry because it was just too much to hassle.
Okay. And you mentioned you went in the store, I think you said every day. Were you referring to King Soopers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How often were you going to King Soopers during that time period? Was it every day or?
I mean, most of everything I needed to do was in that shopping plex, my bank, and, you know, everything was, and I was like within walking distance for like maybe 3 or 4 blocks. So there was pretty much every day that I was in the complex there.
And did you go into King Soopers around 2:20 that afternoon?
I did. I went in to buy strawberries and some tea to snack on and grab some money for work and gas.
And what was going on at the laundromat while you went to King Soopers?
Nothing. It was pretty empty. I think maybe there was a couple of people there, but I was more or less distracted with the kids, you know, being kids and trying to juggle that with, you know, work and, you know, basic normal stuff.
Okay. Were your other kids with you at the laundromat?
My daughter had been, I had just dropped her off before we went to the grocery store. We had to go back because, you know, one of them had forgotten laundry pods and I was kind of getting exhausted with the squabbling. So when my daughter opted to not go with us, I was kind of relieved. And so I walked away. And
How old your daughter?
she's 16 now.
So 2021, she's around 13.
Yeah, she was, yeah,
Okay.
just becoming a teenager and going through the hormones and
Okay. Who went to King Soopers with you at around 2:20 that afternoon?
Nicholas did.
How old is Nicholas now?
He's 25.
So at the time, roughly 22 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And when you got inside King Soopers, what did you and Nicholas do?
We immediately went to the fruit section, grabbed some strawberries, and then grabbed some tea because I was in a rush. I was getting really close to having to be at work, and just kind of relieved that it wasn't too far. Like everything was still really close. I basically set everything up to where I was always within the area of my daughter's school, and that way I could get between her school and work easily without leaving anybody hanging for too long.
Okay. So you grabbed the strawberries, the tea.
Mhm.
Tell the jury what happened next.
We went over to the self-checkout, and I was checking out my stuff, and right as we were about done, I started hearing something that I guess I just couldn't even wrap my brain around it. That I knew what I was hearing, I just couldn't process that I was hearing it until I looked over at my son, and he just looked like my little baby boy, scared and confused. And he said, "That's a gun." And I said, I know, get down.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about
Yeah.
that? You said you knew what the sound was.
hmm
What do you mean by that?
It was loud popping from a firearm, but not a handgun, because it was too loud, and sounded like the rifles. We would always hear when we were living up on the mountaintop, and I had to teach my kids to keep themselves and dogs safe by identifying distance and platforms so they wouldn't be in the way of anything that might be stray.
You say stray, you mean straight bullets being fired?
Yeah, because we were near the national park where people were allowed to hunt, and so I mean, sometimes people are using high powered stuff, and they're having fun or whatever. So it's important to be aware of your surroundings and keep your distance. And so I always taught my kids how to stand there and identify the best they can, so that they don't find themselves in the way of anything that's a problem. And
Sure. And you say identify. What do you mean by identify?
um basically I taught my kids, like, kind of like when you're counting how far away lightning is. You can kind of gauge the echo off the mountain, like where somebody is. And so basically it's distance and rapid fire, like what kind of platform they might be using and how far that bullet might travel.
Are you familiar with guns yourself?
I'm a layman, like nothing. I mean, I had most of my family was in the military and stuff, and so my uncles, would tell me things, and I have my own firearms. Typically, I mean, I left mine, like, which was not normal for me, but that day I was just in a hurry and frustrated, and I looked at it 3 times in my bag, like, and just left it there.
So can I ask you a couple questions about that?
Yeah.
In March of 2021, you owned a firearm?
Yeah, I had a 380.
And a 380, for members of the jury who may not know, what kind of gun is that? What size is it?
It's fairly small. It's similar to a 9mm, but it's just a smaller caliber, more for basically it's a woman's gun. Yeah, lightweight and very little recoil, so it's not gonna kick and jump out of your hand or anything difficult. It's a typical carry for a woman in her bag
And you left the gun where that day?
in my purse. I had a concealed carry purse and I keep it locked in there and just never really thought that I would need it. It was more or less like when I was out late, you know, in different neighborhoods that I'm not familiar with, you know, clients and stuff, I'd have to walk to my car by myself. And so it was more or less just to make sure that I was safe. I never really thought that I would ever be in any position where it would ever be necessary.
Where'd you leave the purse that day?
In my room,
So from your experience with guns, when you hear gunshots, are you often able to distinguish between handguns and long arms or rifles?
I mean, not like, you know, expert or anything, but like I can identify, you know, this racking of the, you know, of a firearm and the amount of seconds between shots generally, you know, have a basic idea of what's going on there, you know.
When you first heard the shots at King Soopers, what were your thoughts? What'd you think?
I was shocked. I heard them outside and it was first kind of like on the exterior of the building, like in the area that we were and traveling eastward.
So were you at the west checkout?
We were supposed to be at the east end because that's where I was parked, but I don't know, I felt like, you know, I'll just stay where I am, even though I turned to Nick and I said, we should be over there because I'm parked over there. And then I was like, never mind, doesn't even matter. Just kind of being typically indecisive.
So instead of the east checkout, you were on the west checkout side.
Mhm.
And you were saying you hear the shots outside moving from west to east.
Uh-huh.
What's the very next thing that happened?
They got louder and then they were inside the store. And I could hear people falling. I just, I couldn't even believe I was hearing it. And I just reminded Nicholas, you know, he was scared and wanted to run down the aisle. And I said, no, it's too long. We won't get to the end. And I'm listening to everything going on the east end. And I decide I'm going to look to see exactly where he's at. And Nicholas is shaking his head at me because he's afraid. And we saw each other and immediately he made it to our area like pretty quick. And it was just noise that, I don't know, I think at that point I was just moving and not thinking about anything else other than we need to keep moving unpredictably so that we're not traveling in a straight line and, you know, being led. I wasn't sure how experienced he was in like hunting or anything like that. So, you know, I didn't want him leading us and ending up on the ground, you know.
So can I back you up a little bit?
Yeah.
When the shooter came in the store, where were you, Ms. Moonshadow?
We were at the very first kiosk of the self-checkout. And my son was down on his hands and knees. And
After
after we heard the gunfire outside, and then at the end of the store, as soon as we heard all the noise and commotion, he immediately got down and I ducked down, and he wanted to run to the right of us, and I said, there's not enough time. And he's staring up at me. He's like, what do we do? And I said, I'm going to look. And then when I realized how close we were to him, like, I just said, go, go.
When you say how close you were, you mean how close you were to the shooter?
Yeah. He had already cleared the east end and was moving in our direction.
How fast was he moving?
Faster than I thought.
What do you mean?
I didn't realize that he was very, very close behind us by the time we got to the door. And we were running, and somebody had fallen in front of my son and was injured, and my son just screamed, Mom, and we made it outside, but instantly I saw somebody on the ground and started running for him, and my son pulled me back and started running with me, and I just started screaming, and I was screaming, where's Beefy, where's my car, I have to help somebody, like, and my son dragged me to the other side of the street, I think I started to pee my pants, screaming, oh my God, what is happening? And then officers started running towards us, screaming, keep going, get behind the buildings.
If it's okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions just so the jury understands how this is all happening, okay?
Yeah.
When you and Nicholas first hear the shots and you go down, did you continue to hear shots after that?
Absolutely.
And you say absolutely. What were you hearing?
I was hearing gunfire and bodies dropping.
Bless you.
I heard a couple of people like making noise I just can't even describe. Like they wanted to say no or something, but there wasn't. It was all pretty quick.
And some of these people physically, where they were located close to you?
They were at the other end and within the checkout aisles. Well, it was like 1 minute there was, normal activity, people around us. And then all of a sudden, there was nobody. It was just me and Nicholas.
How'd you get out of the store, Ms. Moonshadow?
I stood up a little ways and looked between the kiosks, and we made eye contact, and I thought I was looking at somebody who was just as confused and surprised as me. He looked sweaty and almost like just disconnected.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Just like again, chaos, just like completely like a deer in headlights kind of thing. Like, I mean, that was just kind of how I perceived it. Like, I figured he probably had the same look on his face that I had on mine. And so I started praying for him because I didn't know. I think that at that point, my mind was just in a place where I was reactive and
Sorry.
oh no,
Where was Nicholas at that point?
he was still crouched down and watching me, like I said, he wanted to run down the aisle, and I kept telling him no. And he just looked like my little baby again when he was scared, and I would take care of him, and he's just so small and innocent, and I just couldn't let that be the last look I saw on his face. And so I told him to stay down and don't look, just go.
How close was the shooter to you at that point, approximately?
He was just feet behind us on the other side of the kiosk and lane of checkout.
Could you see the shooter?
Mhm.
Well-
I did. We made eye contact.
And what was the shooter doing when you made eye contact?
He was raising his firearm in my direction, and I realized, like, after the fact that he wasn't wearing a t-shirt. It looked like a flak jacket or something he was wearing. But I think at that point I was still just not processing that he was the person firing on us. He wasn't another random shocked person.
Were there other, you described one, were there other random shocked people in the area?
A lady that we were running towards that was at the doors on the east end or west end. She lived in the neighborhood. She had slipped and fallen and broke her back.
Judge, non-responsive, foundation,
Sustained. You want it stricken?
yes.
Instructed to disregard that last statement.
Had the other shoppers and staff at King Soopers appear to you that you could see in the area there at that point?
Judge 401, 403,
Overruled. I think it's relevant for the-
cumulative as well.
in terms of cumulative. I don't know that we have that information as to that point in time. Overruled.
You can answer, Ms. Musha.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure, thank you. You mentioned people looking confused, people looking scared, and I'm asking you, the people at that moment in time that were around you, how did they appear to you?
Like I said, it seemed as though, like, I mean, we had somebody that worked at the store that was helping us, and then all of a sudden it was like he wasn't there. Like, everything happened so fast. It was like I just was hyper focused on my son and listening to everything, so I could stay down and give him direction.
What were you listening for?
I was listening for platform. I figured if I can hear him racking for another round, and how long it would take, I would know if he was having to reload or what we were listening or dealing with, what we were going to have to outrun. And I knew it had to have been an AR platform because of just the weight of racking it and how fast, and there wasn't a lot of time. Like I'm not sure exactly how we made it out of there.
And you mentioned you saw the shooter lifting up the rifle.
Mhm.
What exactly did you see?
He was looking right at me, and he was trying to raise the end of his rifle up. There was the platform where you put your wallet so you can scan and stuff, and it looked to me as though he might have bumped it and had to adjust. And so I looked at Nicholas and I said, "Go." And he said, "No." And I said, "Go now."
What doors did you and Nicholas go out of?
We went out the west end doors, the primary double doors there.
And you started to hit on this, but I want to ask you a couple questions about what you saw outside, okay?
Yeah.
What did you first see when you ran outside, Ms. Moonshadow?
Um, I don't even, I think I was just running, and at first I didn't see anything except for a person that was just outside the doors. She had slipped and fallen, and then to my right, right in the middle of the entry road there, somebody was laying in the middle of the street, and instantly I was just running for him. And my mom or my son was screaming, "Mom, mom." And then as I got closer, he grabbed me around my waist and started to drag me and try to carry me.
Your son did?
Yeah. And I pulled away and I ran across those stones there on the median and said, "Oh my God, where's the car?" Like I couldn't, my mind was going so fast, I couldn't even remember where I had parked. And Nicholas just kept grabbing me and pulling me. And then I see a person on the ramp of the store, and she was down too. And I started trying to run in that direction, and Nicholas said, "No, no, we have to go. We have to run." And I said, oh my God, what's happening?" And I just started kind of breaking down at that point, like,
Where'd you and Nicholas go from there?
He pulled me over to, there's a boulder for the apartment buildings that are just across the street. We were running towards that, and that's when Officer Talley was pulling in, and we made eye contact, and I jetted for his car to try to throw myself on the hood of his car, and then Nicholas again grabbed a hold of me and pulled me behind the rock. And when he started to try to look around it, that's when an officer was already running for us and screaming, "Go, go, get behind the buildings." And there was a lot of rapid gunfire at that point.
Where'd you go from there?
We kept running into the neighborhood that I was supposed to be working in. And I had considered taking my son there, but then I was afraid that I would put her in jeopardy. So we ran to the very center of the neighborhood, where there was some like iron fencing. And then I just like grabbed a hold of it and just started sobbing. And Nicholas, he sat down and just couldn't even, he was in shock. He wasn't quite like crying or anything, but he couldn't process it.
At some point, did you return to pick up your car?
Yeah. There were neighbors that had come out, and they were, I think they were watching it live streamed. And so they asked us if we needed any help, if we, needed.
Responsive.
Sustained.
Where'd you go after speaking with those people?
We walked back around the other side of one of the apartment buildings towards the very end, like where Chase Bank is just directly across the street. It seemed like that would be far enough away. I was worried about Rollo. He was trapped there. We were the very first car right in front of the ramp where, he saw everybody dying, and he's everything to me. So I couldn't leave without him.
Your dog was still in the car at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to move you forward from here, okay?
Mhm.
And I'll ask you a couple questions just about the car, and then I'm going to circle back to one last thing about King Soopers.
Okay.
Okay. Were you able to communicate to law enforcement that it was your dog in the car?
We were right across the street. I was online, basically watching it being reported, and
Judge,
Non-responsive.
it's-
Yes, let me stop you there just a minute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Re-ask the question.
That's my fault. I need to,
okay.
no, it's okay. If I ask you a question asking for one particular thing, I'm going to ask you just to try to answer that one thing if you can. I
Okay.
know this is a lot. I know that's a lot.
Yeah.
But so at some point, did you communicate to law enforcement that your dog was still in the car?
Yes, there was officers that were crouched down beside and behind my car. And then shortly after, my car was surrounded, and they were screaming at my Rollo to put his hands up and get out of the car. And I started screaming, "That's my beefy. Don't hurt him, please." And my son had to basically rush me out of the way because I was getting run after because I was running for my car and back into.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Mhm.
Did you realize that the police thought the movement in the car was possibly a person?
Yeah,
Judge,
he was
calls for speculation.
wearing a T-shirt that
Hold on.
probably.
Can you rephrase the question? I see.
Sure. Did you come to learn, and you can answer this with a yes or no if the answer is a yes or no. Did you come to learn that the police thought Rollo was actually a person in the car?
Yes,
Okay. And your dog was wearing a shirt at the time.
he was. Yeah, he barely had any fuzz. He was a big baby, and I always dressed him up in hoodies and stuff. He was my big boy.
Do you recall? And your dog was okay at the end of that day, right?
He was traumatized and
So
medicated after
me-
that.
There's an objection.
Objector.
So when there's an objection, everyone's got to stop talking. Mr.
I'm gonna, if the court's okay with it, I can just ask you some yes or no questions to move us
Okay.
forward, okay?
Yeah.
You haven't,
I'm just gonna state the objection first, 401, 403, non-responsive.
Your dog wasn't physically harmed by the police that day, right?
Judge,
No.
401,
what's the
403.
irrelevance?
I just don't want the jury to be left with the wrong impression of what happens with the police and the dog. It's a really, I don't want to minimize the importance of it, but it's just a fairly simple question about was the dog physically hurt?
Okay.
Or
just
killed
ask
by
that
the
question.
police.
It's yes or no.
Was your dog physically hurt by the police that day?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Did you come back to Chase Bank to pick up your car on March 25th, a few days later?
Yes.
And then you were interviewed on that day by the police
Yes.
and by a district attorney investigator as well.
Hmm.
You have to answer yes or no.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm not going to ask you to watch the video from March 22nd, but I am going to ask you to look at a photograph, if that's okay.
Okay.
Your Honor, can I approach with what's been marked as people's 19 for identification?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize that photograph, Ms. Moonshadow?
Yeah, I do.
And have you seen that photograph before?
When you showed it to me.
And that was before trial?
Yes.
Okay. Does that photo fairly and accurately depict what was going on in King Soopers when you and Nicholas started to run?
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd move people's 19 into evidence, please.
Objection.
Submitted.
and permission to publish, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
What that means, Em, is that you'll see the photograph now on the screen next to you. And it's also on the screen behind you so the jury can see it, okay? This is the first time the jury's seeing this particular photograph. So can you just walk the jury through who's in this photograph and what's happening at this moment in time?
Me and my son. My son is hunkered down. I didn't realize that he had hesitated. He was really scared and
Judge, I'd ask that the witness just describe in descriptive terms what she's seen on the exhibit.
Sustained.
um,
She was expressing what he was feeling.
he was afraid to
No,
listen to.
no.
Judge,
Re-ask the question, please.
Ms. Moonshadow, when I ask you
Yes.
questions about this photograph,
It's me.
no.
Okay.
Yes. So
Yes, okay.
don't tell us what other people were thinking or feeling. Just tell us what we're looking at in the photograph if you can. So what do we see in this photograph here? Where are you?
I'm turning to run. My son is hunkered down and Elisa is making his way toward us in the top corner there.
So you're referencing the top left-hand corner where the white circle's around there?
I am.
Which person are you in the photograph, Ms. Machado?
I'm the one on the far right.
And what are you holding in your hands, if anything?
Strawberries.
And what direction are you heading at that point in time?
I'm moving towards the primary entrance.
On the west side?
Yes,
Where is Nicholas in that photograph?
he's behind me.
And how is he positioned when you look at that photograph? In other words, where
He's,
is,
he's on his hands and knees.
and he's wearing, it looks like a brown coat.
Yes,
Are you both wearing masks at this point in time?
yes, we are.
Did you know the person who was behind Nicholas on the ground?
No, no, I hadn't even realized that there was a person there. I was aware of the kid that was helping, you know, monitor.
Sustained. Re-ask the question, please.
I think you've answered the question I asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for being here. I don't have any other questions at this point, okay?
Thank you.
no cross-examination?
All right. May she be released as well.
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor,
All right.
please.
Ms. Moonshadow, thank you. You are free to go and you're also released from your subpoena.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to break for lunch, I think until 1:15. Has that been giving you enough time, about an hour? Okay, great. Just reminding you, until we're done, don't discuss the case with anyone by any means.
All right. They're breaking for lunch for another 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes or so. That was intense. That was some very intense testimony. Now that I'm speaking to everybody, welcome, Candace. Everyone, please remember to hit the thumbs up. I actually have stuff that I need to do this afternoon, so I don't think I'm going to be able to stream the rest of the trial today. I'm going to stop it here. But please, look forward to next week with continuing coverage, but also on my other channel, which I'm not linking here, but please look for it. That's where it is. That's the name. I'm going to be scheduling some live streams. One, I have my book club tomorrow where we're reading the Matthew Perry book. And Do I have that here? No, sorry. Where we're reading the Matthew Perry's book. And also I want to do a preparation stream for Donna Adelson's trial, which is starting on the 17th. So I want to just, give like a case overview. And I have some other things that I'm really interested in covering. There's just too much to cover in so little time. But you are all welcome for the stream. I really appreciate you all being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend if I don't see you around. But in case, I'm not sure everybody heard this when I said this yesterday. I want to schedule a stream soon on this channel that you're seeing here, where we talk to each other, not just me talking at you. Thank you, Cinnamon Girl. Not just me talking at you, but us talking to each other about the cases that are closest to our heart in true crime. What got us hooked on true crime and why, and all that stuff. I want to hear that from my peeps. I love visiting with you all. I love talking to you all, but I always feel like I'm talking at you and just responding to, a text in a chat. And I want to have more interaction. So please come over and share. And I do hope that if you're not on YouTube, which I highly recommend, do you want to talk about Chris Watts again? Because that is one of my big cases that brought me in. Yes. Whatever cases are interesting to you, the cases that got people hooked, and why. I want to understand that about people. So, and I did just the other day post a video about Gabby Petito's family and how they've rallied in the aftermath of her murder. So that video is over on that channel if you haven't seen it yet. So yeah, that Karen Reed trial, Candace, the whole Karen Reed case, that entire situation is insane. It's just insane. So anyway, yeah, that's the thing, Patricia. It's kind of hard to find people in our real lives who love, who not love, but who are, daily consumers of true crime. People just don't get it. Yeah, so come on over and talk about whatever case it is that really got you into true crime, or what keeps you in true crime, or the cases that have impacted you the most. For me, yeah, Patricia, I did avoid Gannon's case, but I would still talk about it with other people who would say, this is why this case was so special to me. It's not that I am not interested in it. It's that it's so fucking involved and heavy, and Letitia is such a brat. I usually need to take time to dive into a case and really understand, and I know that she's just, I don't know. Anyway, that whole case is so, and every time I talk about that case, the Gannon Stout case, I can't stop thinking about that little child's face. I just can't. I'm not crying, you guys. I am emotional, but that little child's face and what he went through kills me, man. It really does. It just kills me. Kills me. So, yeah, that was in Colorado too. Stout. Yeah, you're right, Johnny. You're right. I get so, oh wow, Patricia, I didn't know that. I get really emotional about kids. I really do. I get super emotional about kids. I get super emotional about like Summer Wells and and I consider, even though Gabby Petito is 22, I consider her a kid, I really consider her a kid. Oh, wow. Be frank. So you and Patricia have kind of a case connection. He went missing on your birthday and was found on Patricia's birthday. Oh, man. It really kills me. And every single day there are new cases popping up about kids who are being tortured and chained and you know, hell, just horribly abused. And it really gets to me, you guys. It does. It just does. So that's why when I have channels, I don't want my channels just to be content just for content. I want us to learn from it, you know. I want us to learn from it so it doesn't keep happening. And that's why I admire Gabby's family so much, is because they could have been paralyzed, but they literally immediately started a foundation and have started making actual change for domestic violence victims. And that I have far more respect and admiration for that than, you know, that just holds high value in my mind. I don't know much about the Lori Schaefer trial, Candace, but I'll look into it. Yeah, I would love to hear that, Patricia. So all that to say, please go subscribe to my other channel, and I'm trying to build that channel up so I can move everything over there, even my trial coverage. But I need more subscribers and more traction there before I feel comfortable doing that. So yeah. It's so awkward when you talk with someone and you're saying bye and then you're saying bye again and bye again, and conversation just never ends. I feel kind of, oh, sorry. All right. I will see you all later. Talk to you soon.